The House will come to order. Prayer by the chaplain.
Mr. Speaker, representatives, we are, of course, observing President's Day today, and you might have a little fun Googling Presidents Washington and Lincoln and similarities between them. Let me point out just one. They were both surveyors. Surveyors have to be able to pay attention to the details right in front of them and keep a long-term vision as well. Let's pray that for all our leaders, including yourselves. Let's take a quiet moment and pray for vision, attention to the details, and to the long term. What a privilege that you have given us, Creator God, to make us citizens of this wonderful nation. As you granted both to Presidents Washington and to Lincoln an ability to see what was right in front of them and also a vision for the nation, so grant these same gifts to the members of this House of Representatives and all the leaders of our wonderful state of Minnesota. Light, vision, peace, and good in all things. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
The chaplain for today is Father Kevin M. McDonough, Church of St. Peter Claver, St. Paul and Incarnation in Minneapolis. The Pledge of Allegiance. Please remain standing and recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. A quorum is present. Reports of standing committees and divisions.
Oh, I better read the journal first.
What? Oh, yeah. Journal of the day.
Journal of the House, 88th session, 2013, 14th day, St. Paul, Minnesota, Thursday, February 14th, 2013.
If there's no objection, further reading of the journal will be
Mr.
Where? Oh. Okay. Will be dispensed with, and the journal approved as corrected by the chief clerk. Hearing no objection, the reports will be adopted. So now we can do reports of standing committees?
Yes.
Reports of standing committees and divisions. A copy of this order of business has been placed on each member's desk. If there's no objection to the reports, the reports will be adopted. Representative Anderson, P.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I rise to object to the adoption of the Standing Committee report and divisions. I'd like to ask for a roll call on the adoption of the committee report from the Housing, Finance, and Policy Committee, House File number 83.
Okay, members, and Representative Anderson, I will take that up if we could adopt the other reports first, and then we'll come back to that motion if you're okay with that. Okay, so members, Representative Anderson withdraws his point at this point. Members, if there's no objection to adoption of the reports of the standing committees except for House File number 83, please rise to your objection. Hearing no objection to everything but House File 83, those reports are adopted. Representative Anderson, now we are on the adoption of House File number 83. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Again, I rise to speak against the adoption of this report. Our committee heard this bill, and it was a full standing room only committee room. We went about 15 minutes beyond the deadline of when the committee was supposed to end. I believe the 24-hour rule was waived for the committee, and there was a last amendment proposed and adopted after the ending time for the committee. I raised a couple of objections to that amendment, and I was assured that it would be fixed or the language corrected by the time it went to the next committee. And because of those things, I would like to have that report objected to and brought back to the committee.
Is there further discussion? Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, this particular bill, we spent a lot of time on it, and it is true that we had an amendment that was non-controversial amendment. The only thing that was objected to was some reviser's directions. There wasn't any substance to any objection to the bill, to the amendment. And we did waive the rules and gave our all of our committee members the chance to look at the whole bill and bring any amendments, and it didn't seem to be that there were any amendments. And this doesn't sound exactly right, Representative Anderson, because we went through the whole thing and we spent time and made sure that every single person who wanted to testify from every side had a chance to speak. Every single question that all members had were honored. I'm just surprised that there'd be any dissent, because when we went through the whole process so carefully, it seemed like there was an objection to the process. So, Mr. Speaker, I guess I would, I'm not sure what the proper motion is, I guess, too.
So, members, we're on the adoption of the committee report on House File number 83. So, a green vote would be to adopt the report and move it on to the Civil Law Committee. A red vote would be to send it back to the Housing Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I urge a green vote.
Representative Anderson.
Just to clarify, Mr. Speaker, I did request a roll call vote.
A roll call was requested. There's 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. This is an example. It's my understanding that there was an amendment that was offered on this bill at the very beginning of committee. I believe that it was a delete all amendment. And the coding and the timestamp on that amendment was prior to the 24-hour rule. But yet the members of the minority party didn't get to see that amendment until committee itself, and certainly members of the public also did not either. And I think that's the purpose for the 24-hour rule. So I appreciate the chair's commitment to make sure that every bit of testimony was heard, but I think part of adopting these 24-hour rules is so that we are honoring the general public and giving them an opportunity to see the amendments prior to committee. So we know because of the stamp on the amendment, and I believe that the amendment is actually going around on the floor right now, so you can see the time stamp on it. But obviously the amendment had been prepared prior to the 24-hour rule. The time stamp from the revisor's office shows that. So, what we haven't done here is honored the general public by giving them an opportunity to see this amendment ahead of time, even though it had been prepared ahead of time. We didn't let the public see it. So, I think the rules that we've put in place, and we've heard numerous members of this body talk about, from both sides of the aisle, this isn't a partisan thing, we've heard members of this body talk about the fact that we need to honor these 24-hour rules because of the transparency to the general public. So here's our opportunity to basically honor that and send this bill back to committee so the general public does have an opportunity to read and understand the amendment and really absorb it, and then have an opportunity to give input. So, I would ask that that you vote red on this, that you vote against adopting the committee report. We send it back to committee, and we do what the rules are in place to do, which is, provide transparency and give the public really an opportunity to have input on this bill. So, pretty simple. I'm sure most members just didn't understand that this had happened, but we shouldn't be waiving the 24-hour rule when we've got amendments prepared prior to the 24-hour rule having gone in place. So the amendment was prepared in time. We waived the rule for no reason. We didn't show the public the amendment. Obviously, we screwed up. This is our opportunity to tell the public, whoops, we screwed up. Send the bill back to the committee. Give the public the opportunity to have the input that they deserve. And we can move it on after that. So a red vote is what makes common sense here, members.
Representative Holberg.
Thank you. Will Representative Anderson yield?
He will yield. Representative Holberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, it's my understanding that there was actually two amendments, that there was a delete all amendment that in fact had a time date stamp which would have allowed for a posting 24 hours before the start of the committee, and that was not posted, that appeared at the committee, and then there was another amendment that we have a copy here. So there was actually two amendments, one being a delete all, that the public nor the minority had any opportunity to see before they showed up in committee. Is that correct?
Representative Anderson.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. Yes, Representative Holberg, that is correct. There were two amendments, and the one was a delete all amendment. The second was the one that really caused me to scratch my head in that it came so late in the committee hearing schedule that day, and that it did have some mechanical flaws to it. But it was voted over our objections and passed and sent on to the next committee.
Further discussion. Representative Freiberg.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is my bill that's being discussed here. As has been mentioned, there were two amendments. One was delete all, which was my amendment, which was, as I understand it, was made available to all the committee members well before the 24-hour rule. But in order to make sure that the minority had the opportunity to offer any amendment they wished, the Chair Clark very graciously offered to waive the 24-hour rule in her committee, as I understand is her right to do. She did mention at the outset of the hearing on this bill that she had a technical amendment to make, and she described the substance of it. During the course of the committee, the amendment was prepared, and the minority had ample opportunity to offer amendments, as I understand it. And to the extent there are any issues with this amendment, they can be discussed in the Civil Law Committee. So I would urge to a green vote.
Representative Clark.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Oops. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I was just checking with my staff again to make sure that the email had gone out, and he just assured me that it went out at 12:08 the day before, the day before, and it had more than the 24-hour rule. I guess it was 2 days before. Yeah, and so Mr. Chairman and Representative Anderson, I'm not quite sure what your concern is, because we gave you every chance. There was no objection to our voting. What I heard you do was vote against the bill. But there was an objection to going forward with the vote. And it was just, so I'm really confused about what you're saying. And, I guess I could, I just urge members to vote green. And if I guess if there's a concern in the future, please bring it up during the committee process. We heard nothing from you to object to the process at that time.
Further discussion. Representative Anderson.
Thanks again, Mr. Speaker. Well, I did object to that second amendment. I believe on 2 occasions I objected to that specific amendment, and it was at that point you assured us that the changes would be made in the next committee. But that's not the way I feel business should be done. It should be corrected, done right the first time in our committee, and that's why I objected to it.
Representative Scott? Okay. Okay, members, seeing no further discussion, we are on the motion to adopt the committee report on House File number 83. A green vote would be to adopt the report and move it on to civil law. A red vote would be to not adopt the report, and it would go back to the Housing Committee. The clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 67 ayes and 61 nays, the report is adopted. Second reading of House files.
Second reading, House File 197.
Second reading. Introduction and first reading of House bills. And members, I just want to clarify that House File 677, I believe it is, which is the governor's tax bill, there was a clerical error. It says that it's referred to taxes on your sheet, but it's actually going to be referred to rules, and it says that on the documents here. So it will be going to rules.
Mr. Speaker?
The clerk will introduce these House files and give them their first reading.
Introduction and first reading of House File 631 through 712.
First reading, House File 631 through 712. Representative Lesh, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker, members, I stand to ask for a moment of silence. Officer Josh Leno is a St. Paul police officer who died on Saturday as a result of wounds sustained in chasing down a suspect from a week before. Officer Leno was a noble son of St. Paul. Scripture tells us, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they should be called the children of God." Officer Leno was a son of St. Paul. I ask for a moment of silence to remember him, and that our prayers may go out to his family.
Mr. Speaker?
Representative Fisher, what purpose do you rise?
Point of personal privilege. Want to recognize some people who are here today from my district.
State your point of personal privilege.
Thank you. It's to recognize some people from my district here today. Sierra Kumi, who's standing over here on the side. She is here. She's homeschooled. She is here learning about the civic process and has been learning about what happens here at the Capitol. And along with her is her grandfather, Kevin Kenny. And he is a person who used to be a legislative analyst with House Research here from 72 to 79. And he was also a former deputy commissioner for the Department of Human Services. So I hope we can all give them a warm welcome.
Messages from the Senate.
Message from the Senate. Mr. Speaker, I hereby announce the passage by the Senate of the following House file herewith returned as amendment by the Senate, which amendment the concurrence of the House is respectfully requested. House File 6, an act relating to taxation. Signed, Joann M. Zoff, Secretary of the Senate. Davids moves that the House refuse to concur in the Senate amendments to House File 6, that the Speaker appoint a conference committee of 5 members of the House, and that the House requests that a like committee be appointed by the Senate on the disagreeing votes of the two houses.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I ask for a roll call.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and that is my motion to refuse to concur. And let me point out a few reasons why we should refuse to concur, and then I will be asking Chair Lenczewski to yield for a couple questions here also. But members, House File 6 was a 3-page bill that we passed out of here unanimously. It's a really, really good bill, and it's a bill that we made better with an amendment that Chair Lenczewski was so gracious to accept on the House floor, helping those former Northwest Airline employees on their IRAs. Very, very good bill. Passed unanimously. It goes over to the Senate, and now we have the motion to concur, the concurrence here, and we have about 17 more pages. So if you look at the unofficial engrossment for House File number 6, this thing grew from 3 pages to 20 pages. Now, 1 week ago today, correct me if I'm wrong, 1 week ago today we talked about how we have to go through the committee process. We don't abuse the process. We have to have the committees do their job, and on and on and on. So what do we get back? We have a 3-page bill, House File 6, that's a very good bill that Chair Lenczewski is carrying, and it turns into a 20-page bill that has a lot of stuff that I never saw in my life here, or at least in the tax committee this year. So if Chair Lenczewski would yield for a series of questions.
She will yield. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Madam Chair. How long did we discuss the IRRB language in the tax committee?
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We did not.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, you know, I thought a week ago today we were talking about committee process, and committee process is something we should be using here. If Chair Lenczewski would yield for another question.
She will yield. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chair Lenczewski, how long did we discuss the tax incident study in committee this year? That in the bill, a very, very important piece of legislation that Representative Garofalo had worked on over the last couple of years to make the tax incident study actually reflect what's actually out there, because any person in Minnesota doesn't just pay state taxes, but they also pay federal taxes, and quite a bit more in federal taxes as a rule. How long did we talk about, Chair Lenczewski, the tax incident study?
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Representative Davids, we did not.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If Chair Lenczewski would yield, I'm kind of confused on this, and if Representative Mahoney could get ready for a question here too on the IRRB. Chair Lenczewski, could you please explain to this body how the IRRB language works and why it's needed? I have no clue.
Representative Lenczewski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, and Representative Davids. You know, I understand your frustration, and as we take up conformity, I share some of that. Members, I want to personally thank the governor and the speaker, the majority leader, the minority leader, and you, Mr. Chair. All of us share the understanding that every day we wait to pass conformity, we're penalizing taxpayers. And so I will hearken back in answering your question that you indeed, Mr. Representative Davids, you asked for a declaration of an urgency a few weeks back, asking us to quickly get this passed, and that's what we're trying to do here today. We did not follow your urging because we needed a committee process, which we did. Just like this IRRB amendment was not brought forward, neither were all the amendments that the minority offered on the floor here when we took up House Bill 6 on the floor. None of the tax amendments that were carried by you and Representative Anderson and others were ever considered or brought up by the tax committee. So I think we know that everyone understands the process. Both the minority and the Senate has used their opportunity to try to pass on their priorities, as we saw. And just like these two items you're raising were not raised in taxes, neither were the minority amendments this year. So I certainly understand this is a bump in the road. I'm not happy about it. But I will tell you that every day we wait is another day. And I hear your motion. You want to go to a conference committee and fight with the Senate over the IRRB provision and fight with the other side on the changes to Representative Garofalo's legislation that he passed either last year or the year before, I don't recall. And that's certainly understandable and frustrating. The tension relies, members, on the fact that we're holding up middle-class tax relief for almost 250,000 Minnesotans. People did start filing their taxes February 1st. Today is February 18th. And I think we all know, and former Chair Davids knows well, as someone who's chaired the tax committee and served on many conference committees in commerce and others, that you don't get everything you want in conference committee. So that move alone, members, would not guarantee that we would prevail. What we do know is for sure we would delay this important tax relief to Minnesotans, and more importantly, we would inconvenience them as each day ticks by and they are filing their taxes in a way we don't intend them to, later forcing them to amend their own taxes to get the relief that Congress, the President, the Republican Congress, the Democratic Congress, and indeed legislators want folks to get. So, I understand, and I'm frustrated too, Representative Davids, I am. And I have to make that decision just like you are for your caucus. And my thought is that I'm going to press the Senate very hard to look at some changes to what they put on in their bill. And I know, Representative Davids, you had a number of tax provisions that you passed as a former tax chair that you may know that one of the tax committees, the division, in fact, had originally put on this bill and then was later removed by the tax chair in the Senate. So there's been a lot of attempts by a lot of people, both here on the floor and the minority, both me accepting your amendment, Representative Davids, for the pilots, the Senate 2 committees, and then the governor has a say as well. That's part of the big dance of democracy. But at the end of the day here, members, we need to concur now. This is something that Representative Dowd and Representative Thiessen, Representative Murphy, Senator Bach, Senator Skoye, Senator Hann, the governor, I have heard every one of these people talk about how important it is that we pass conformity as quickly as we can, and that's what we're doing here today. I know that's a long-winded answer to your question, but members know we did not review these provisions. We're not happy about them either, but I urge you to not support the Davids motion, members, and let's pass this bill and get it signed by the governor as quickly as we can.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chair Lenczewski, I care about your happiness. And you've said twice that you're not happy. Well, I'm not happy either, so we got two grumpy old tax chairs. You're not old, but you sound a little grumpy there. I'm old. I am definitely old. Members, we are not holding up anything here. I asked for an urgency several weeks ago. It was taken off the calendar last week, or the week before, and so here we are today. You don't accept something. This has to go to conference. The The IRRB language and the federal tax incidence study language have to be stripped off. It can take a whole 10 minutes. The Senate is rolling over us like you can't hardly believe right here, right now. And I'm not up for that. I'm really not. So we're not holding up anything that can't be taken care of in about a 10-minute conference committee. What the Senate did here is wrong. So with the logic, well, we don't like it, what if the Senate had put the healthcare exchange on the House File 6? What if they had put some other poison pill? As far as I'm concerned, they put a couple poison pills on here. And we don't have to take this from the Senate. We're not slowing anything up. A 5-minute conference committee, and here we go. Representative Lenczewski's House File 6 is a great bill. Everybody in this chamber voted for it. She did a great job on it. And it comes back as garbage. Mr. Speaker, if the chair of the tax committee, my good friend Chair Lenczewski, would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Chair Lenczewski, I asked the question about the IRRB language, and then you talked about other things. Could you tell me what that IRRB language does, because I don't know?
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, Representative Davids, and I do think our Iron Range delegation here can go through the minutia if you would like a more detailed answer. I think what it boils down to is there's an additional senator being added to the piece of legislation. I think the folks who are representing the area can go through it with you. You know, we, as you stated, we did not have a hearing on that. And yet Representative Moline is carrying legislation in this important area, and I know Representative Anzels and Metz are working on this as well. I think, going through the detail of that provision, as you know, this is not an amendable motion here today. We either concur or we don't. So members, I just, before you maybe want to ask folks who represent the affected area, I do want members to not, I want to disagree with you, Representative Davids, that we are not getting rolled here, members. The House, bipartisanly, is winning because the House wanted conformity. Members, you should know this. There's a Senate provision, and the governor cares about the tax incidence report, as I understand it. But what did the House want? What does the House want? The House wants federal conformity. The House has been the leader on federal conformity from the day we walked into the Capitol this year. This is the House getting federal conformity. This is the House getting 250,000 filers are going to be affected with tax relief. This is a priority of the House. This bill is House File 6. You can go find out what Senate file number that is if you're interested. You can ask yourselves, but for the House fighting for federal conformity from the very first day, pushing the bill to Ways and Means, pushing the bill to the floor, that's what got people moving in the other areas of this government here, folks. So if you wonder what's happening here today is the House, bipartisanly, is achieving a major objective, tax relief for Minnesotans in a timely way. Again, members, I hope you will not send this to a conference committee. Pass it today. Let's get it to the governor for a signature.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if Representative Lenczewski would yield, and I don't want to defer to any other members here. This is Representative Lenczewski's bill, House File 6. Once again, I'll try it again. What does the IRRB language do? And as far as the issue of what the House wants, this House member doesn't want this. This House member wants House File 6 as it passed the House, not with some items that we never heard in tax committee. Let's protect the integrity of the tax committee. What in the world are we doing here? The Senate, I tell you, if we let this one go, Katie bar the door on the next bill we send over there that's a good bill that passes out of here unanimously. Who knows what they'll put on next? If we're not going to stand up and say we're not taking it, the same thing is going to happen again and again and again. So again, the question, if the chair would yield, is what does your language, I don't care what anybody else thinks, what does your language do for the IRRB, Madam Chair?
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. At its core, it adds a senator. It changes the rules. Currently, if you have to have 50% of your area in the taconite area to put a member on. It reduces that to a third. It adds that additional senator through a committee process that the Senate sets up. And it turns a proportion of the public folks into a requirement that they be elected folks.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Lenczewski, and that was good that House Research could help out with that, but I think, is House Research going to go to every of the 132 members that seated on this floor today and tell us what it is? We haven't heard this in committee. If Representative Mahoney would yield for a question.
Representative Mahoney will yield for a question? He will yield, yes. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Mahoney, you know I have a tremendous amount of respect for you, and as a committee chair, I like Gunther better, but you're pretty good. What are your feelings on the change in language on the IRRB? What committee, I think it went through your committee, was it sent to go somewhere else? It didn't go to tax committee. Representative Mahoney, if you'd yield.
Representative Mahoney.
Well, thank you, Mr. Representative Davids. Yes, it did actually come into my committee. We heard it, I can't remember whether it was Tuesday or Thursday, and we sent it off to GovOps, where it should go. It was changing a board. And if you don't want Representative Lenczewski to tell you about the bill, I could tell you a little bit about the bill. But more important to me, and more important to the citizens of Minnesota, is so that they can file their tax returns only once and conform to federal law and get their refund. That's way more important than whether this goes to, Representative Maline's bill goes to GovOps or not. It's important that we serve the people of Minnesota rather than bicker about a process here. That's the most important piece of this. And hopefully we get this bill onward and the governor signs it, and my wife will be happier because she can file her taxes without having to do it twice.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hope members are paying attention here. Now we have a bill that changes a board that doesn't even get heard in the GovOps committee. Really. And we're letting the Senate roll us. I can't believe we're doing this. I can't believe. And as far as time, folks, about 2, 3, 4, 5 weeks ago when I stood up and asked for an emergency, time didn't seem to bother anyone then. All I'm asking for is have the Speaker appoint a conference committee, get that language out of there, go back to the very, very good bill that Representative Lenczewski passed off this floor unanimously. Not even heard in GovOps. And if you do look at the language, what does it do? It removes citizens from the IRRB board. And puts a bunch of politicians on there. How can anybody, regardless of the side of the aisle they're on here, how can anyone support removing citizens from the board and putting on a bunch more politicians? That just doesn't work for me. Then we get into the federal conformity numbers. If the chair would yield, Chair Lenczewski would yield.
She will yield. Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Chair Lenczewski, why not include the federal numbers? Are the federal numbers there yet? Do we have them? Can we see them before we make this important decision on the tax incident study? Where are we there? Before you ask a question on this floor, Chair Lenczewski, you're supposed to know the answer. I don't. This didn't go through the committee. I would have asked a series of questions in committee on that to see just exactly, are those numbers there? Doesn't Commissioner Franz like the numbers? He doesn't want to include them because it actually shows that we have, maybe the rich are paying their fair share, if you will. Where are we on the tax incident study, and why was it so important for the governor's office to remove that language?
Representative Lenczewski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Davids, members. I don't know, I can't answer for Commissioner Franz or the governor, but I can tell you, members, I've always opposed Representative Garofalo's bill, so that's just in a personal point, and I'm sure he's here and will speak to it. I know Representative Garofalo is looking forward to hearing that tax incidence change, and I've been a strong opponent of that. I know when you were last in the majority, you all passed that, but members may want to recall that the DFL side of the tax committee was a strong opponent of that provision. So I don't think you'll hear a lot of defense here of Representative Garofalo's legislation. And members, the reason is our tax incidence report shows us what the burden is in a number of ways, by decile, by population, by income, for our state and local taxes combined. It doesn't attempt to address federal taxes, and that provision that Representative Garofalo passed in your bill, Mr. Chair, is something that I know the minority supported. The now majority never did, and I really can't comment as to why the governor or the Senate was making a change there. But members, as you think about this, you should know why some of us are glad to see it go if it becomes law. And, we really are a state legislature. And if we're going to decide how we're going to review our tax code by looking what the feds did on something, we're just going to be paralyzed here. Nobody would want to replicate what they're doing. And I understand that, what the numbers will probably show if you put in the income tax incidence on the federal level, because the federal income tax is so much more progressive than all states' tax, it'll show that the income tax burden on some folks are a little harsher on some at the higher income level if you don't have that piece of data in there. So I get that. It still, doesn't deny the fact that those at the top pay less as a percentage of their income than everyone else. But I think it helps bolster one argument. The problem is this report is not the place for that in the tax incidence. If members feel that way, you can just say that. You can just say, I don't like that the federal government has a more progressive income tax code, but to put it into a report that we've done for about 20 years that does not contemplate federal taxes is not something that most people, at least on my side of the aisle, have supported. Now, I understand many on your side do, but as to why the governor and the Senate were willing to add this on, I don't know. I was not a part of that discussion. I'm fighting for what the House wanted, which is conformity. And so, members, let's not forget here, if people want to go to conference committee, then you're not willing to get federal conformity done. If you want to hold up federal conformity over a few pages in a report and discussion on what's happening with the IRRB, just vote with Representative Davids. But if you want more to pass on convenience and simplicity in tax filing and tax cuts for middle-class Minnesotans, whether they're teachers, folks with IRAs, or people who send their kids to college, then you should oppose the Davids motion.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and there she goes again. Folks on this side of the aisle are slowing up conformity. Isn't that something? Well, what the tax chair just said is exactly contrary to the truth. This side of the aisle, every member on this side of the aisle voted for an emergency a month ago. We are not holding up anything here. Just think of the presidents we're sending. We send a good bill over the Senate, they put a bunch of garbage on it and shove it at us. And we're disappointed, but we accept it. Really? Is that what this House has come to? The tax chair just said she was not part of what the Senate did. Isn't that kind of a problem? She said she was not part of it, what the Senate did? So in other words, the House had no say in what the Senate did. And it may not, some of you members may stand up and say, well, it's not a big deal kicking citizens off the IRRB board and replacing with politicians. Maybe that's not a big deal. I don't know, because I didn't see it in committee. May not be a big deal for the tax incidence side, but you know what? It's the law. That money has been spent. Where are the numbers? I'm quoting my good friend, the chair of the tax committee from last biennium, when a situation happened where there was some question on some movement of bills. Chair Lenczewski said, and I agree with her 100%, the process still matters. Chair Lenczewski said, We're just the minority, but we are duly elected. I agree. I agree. Chair Lenczewski, and I quote, "But I do think the process matters. No input from the governor, no input from the minority, no discussion on any significant way. And I just want to note that it's disappointing to watch the process play out. Certainly, you have the votes in the House and Senate, and this probably will get signed. But it's the fact that this body has 62 people on one side, 72 on the other side, so it's pretty darn close, and it would have been nice to know what a bunch of legislators over here are going to have some benefit under this bill." I agree. Chair Lenczewski, you're absolutely right. Stand up for the tax committee. Stand up for the House. Send this back for a 4-minute conference committee, maybe 3.5, and take this bill and tell the Senate to change it. We're better than this, members. Don't let the Senate dictate this, because if they do it on this bill today, Katie, bar the door. It's going to be every day. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And I just wanted to respond to a couple of comments that were made regarding the language to change the IRRB board. Some things that I think need to be clarified and what the legislation actually does. Representative Davids, we actually can't seat a board right now under current law. The current law says that there are 5 senators, 5 representatives, and 3 non-elected members that serve on our board. And that a majority of the legislators appointed have to have at least 50% of their legislative district within the taconite assistance area, which is the service area of the IRRB. After redistricting, we unfortunately were not able to meet that threshold. There aren't a majority of us that have at least 50% of our district within the service area. And so we had to change the statute because we were unable to seat a board. And just so newer members understand what the IRRB does, we are funded by a production tax that is paid by the mining company in lieu of a property tax. It is a local property tax, and that's where the revenue comes from, and that's the money that we spend. And, Representative Davids, I doubt that you have any cities in your district or any counties that have city councils or county boards that have non-elected people simply appointed to the board and have the same vote as an elected city councilor or an elected county commissioner to be able to spend local property tax dollars. The 3 non-elected members were added to the IRRB in 1998. Since then, it has become political appointments. There is an appointment made by the governor, the Speaker of the House, and the Senate Majority Leader. People are appointed based on whether or not their political affiliation lines up with the governor, the Speaker of the House, or the Senate Majority Leader. They are the non-elected members on the IRRB that have the same vote as elected legislators who are elected to serve the taconite assistance area. I think it's bad public policy to have members who have no accountability through the electoral process to the voters when they're making decisions based on how we spend local property tax dollars. I also think it's bad public policy to have our non-elected members be appointed based on their political affiliation, and it's been done on both sides of the aisle. We had a former Republican staffer as one of our non-elected members at the IRRB. We have former Representative Joe Begich, and I would bet now that Tom Rukavina is retired, we'd have a former Representative Tom Rukavina. So when 2 out of the 3 non-elected appointments are former legislators, you can decide for yourself how much you think that they actually reflect the general public and citizenry. These were changes that had to be made in order for us to be able to seat a board. And the non-elected members go to public policy decisions, Representative Davids, that we make sure that members of the board are accountable to the public. Now, as far as this language being attached to the tax conformity bill, that was not my idea. I had a separate bill moving through the House. It was going through the committee process. But here at the legislature, we have both a Senate and a House, and the Senate decided that they wanted this language put in the tax conformity bill. And although, I may not necessarily agree with the vehicle that they're using to get this language passed, I think that Representative Lenczewski said it best when this is about conforming to the federal tax code. This is about tax relief for thousands of Minnesotans, and I don't think that we should be holding up tax relief for Minnesotans because we're fighting over a small provision in the bill. Thank you.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I heard in the earlier debate discussion about the tax incident study, and a little bit later I'd like to see if the Representative Lenczewski can yield to two questions.
You want to do that now or later?
See if she'll yield now, and then I'll do
She
the
will
background.
yield, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When I look at tax incidents, I look at how much tax dollars come, and whether we're paying it to the state or to the federal government, how much of the general fund comes back for programs for the citizens of the state. I hope every dollar that we pay out to the federal government comes back. I'm sure it doesn't. In fact, I'm positive it doesn't. But that still doesn't mean that our general fund budget does not include taxes paid by Minnesotans, sent to D.C. They take out their cut and send back to fund our roads and other projects. And I think it would be good for us to include that. So I've got two questions for Representative Lenczewski. First one is, what portion of our all funds budget is funded from federal funds? And next is, how much federal tax money do Minnesota citizens pay to the federal government? Thank you.
Representative Lenczewski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, Representative Quam. Not being the Ways and Means Chair or lead, I can't answer the first question. I think Representative Holberg or Representative Carlson could help you. The tax committee really isn't doing the spending side of the equation. We're the raising side of the equation, so I can't answer that. I don't know what's going in and out through the feds, and maybe Representative Carlson or someone else could answer that for you.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, if you're, aren't really that into, that point, which I can understand, then what is the germaneness of having the Senate tack this into the bill? And that's to everybody. Is, this tax bill for conformity is a good thing. But to be honest, if we're going to tell people what you're being taxed, and frankly, on some people there's more being sent to D.C. than to St. Paul, we ought to be able to have that. Whether you say, well, we should have two different so they know both, fine. But being a physicist, engineer, I'm used to looking at data. And I'd prefer the raw, full data than something that's a select portion thereof. And so I would agree that we need to go back, have a conference committee, and have this taken out. And I don't think it should have been in that bill. So I support the motion to not concur.
Representative Anzels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker and members, Representative Moline has done a great job of explaining the IRRB provision in this bill. I would add just a couple of additional comments. The first is, we have a situation where we cannot seat the board. And the board is necessary in order to do the public's business. And the board can't be seated because of redistricting, because there are only 5 legislators who meet the 50% threshold. Now, the other body has chosen a remedy. It's a remedy that did not go through their committee process. It's a remedy that did not have public participation by our locally elected officials and mayors and city council people, township officers and county board commissioners. And it was a decision of the other body to simply add a provision to a bill that was going to be moving out of the chamber. Representative Moline's approach is far better. Transparent, open. It's going through the committee process. It's gone through one committee, referred to another. Far preferable to the process used in the other body. And so let's not make more of this than what it really is. There will be an IRRB board. It will do the public's work. It will include elected officials, and the public will be well served.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. And first of all, before I get into the debate on this, last Monday we had a debate on the rules changes in this committee, in this body. And while not getting into the facts of the discussion, I had an exchange with a member on the other side of the aisle from Hennepin County, and I used some tone that I haven't used on the House floor before. I just want to apologize to him right now for that. Again, without getting into the facts of it, certainly that tone may work for some members. It may not work for others. It just doesn't work for me, and I kind of found myself regretting that in the last week, and I just wanted to apologize and do my best to say that. I can't promise I won't do it again, but I can at least promise you that I'll try to not do it again. So I'd appreciate that. But to the discussion at hand here, members, and to Mr. Speaker, members, and Representative Lenczewski, one of the things I pride myself on when I was in the majority is I developed a certain reputation for handing the Senate its dinner and getting a pretty good, fair amount of provisions of the House provisions enacted in the statute. And I have to tell you, the thing that worries me most about this bill is that Bach and his boys are setting up the reputation to roll you again. That's what they're going to do. It's no secret that the governor is on the ballot next year, the House is on the ballot next year, and that when push comes to shove at the end of this session, Tax Chair Tom Bach, and make no mistake about it, he is the chair of the Tax Committee, he's going to sit down with you guys and say, well, I suppose we could go to a special session over this, but why don't the House and the governor get together and figure this out and try to come to a remedy on this, and you're going to end up exempting the Senate's provisions just as you have in House File 6. Now, Mr. Speaker and members, there's a reason why Section 2 is in the bill. It's because some on the left don't like facts. Some on the left don't like reality. The reality is our small business owners pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes than do the middle class and lower classes. It's what the data says. It's what reality is. And it ruins the talking point. It ruins the redistribution talking point of the left to say that businesses and job providers aren't paying their fair share. In fact, the data shows that in fact, they pay a higher percentage of their income in taxes than do other sections. But that's a secondary issue to the problem we have here, and that is that we're seeing the Senate stepping on the House and getting their provisions, and we're setting a very bad precedent for the remainder of the session. This is the first day of class, and the teacher has established the tone for the rest of the session, and the teacher is Senate Majority Leader Tom Bach.
Representative Lenczewski.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, I must just disagree with Representative Garofalo in the strongest way. First of all, the House knows well it's never been rolled by the Senate when we were in the majority. I don't know if you can make that claim, but we feel pretty good about our record there and have been very successful. But, members, I do believe that Minnesotans want us to compromise. This is not a winner-take-all situation. The Senate can, try to have it their way, and we can too, and we can go back and forth for another month. Meanwhile, Minnesotans are waiting. And if folks think, I want to repeat, I don't know if Representative Garofalo was not on the floor, the core of this bill, indeed the bulk of this bill, it's hard to even notice the two additional provisions that are added to conformity. This bill is federal conformity. And members, in the three-way negotiation between the House, Senate, and the governor, what the House wanted is conformity. And it's pretty hard to understand how anyone could think that's getting rolled. The House wanted conformity. Now, I'm not going to go so far to publicly say that others did not. I'm choosing my words carefully, and people should listen. The Minnesota House, 127 people, voted yes to conformity. And but for the House, there would be no conformity. There would be no bill. So members, this is the choice. And we're wasting time, and we can keep doing this, but the electorate wants us to compromise. Now, if folks are expecting to watch me as a tax chair to always say, unless the House gets its way on everything, we're never doing anything, well, you're not going to get that in me, and the Speaker should take the gavel away now. But I think the Speaker, and I can't speak for him, I can speak for myself, the days of failing to compromise are over. People are sick of us not being able to compromise. The House isn't going to stand here today, 127 people united, and say, you know, we're mad about this thing, even though we mostly get what we want, indeed almost completely what we want, federal conformity, and so we're just going to continue to put this off. Let's govern, folks. Let's govern. Let's pass this bill. Let's get it signed.
Representative Sudzinski.
Mr. Speaker, members, I just have a comment. You know, one of the big issues that we're seeing is the health care exchange. And today on this floor, I never believed that we would hear from the members of the opposite party talking about the issues that we care so dearly about. You know, in the health care exchange, we've got a seven-member board that's being set up, appointed by the governor, appointed by elected officials, not having elected officials, not having accountability. And yet those are the exact same things and exchanges that they're looking to make in the IRRB. So here's a powerful, IRRB has commissioner status within the governor's office. They have an appointed commissioner, a former member that sat on this floor, that is accountable to the governor, that holds the seat. We have the district set up, and yet we have an extreme portion of that bill that's going to be coming forward within the healthcare exchange that sets up a super agency that has no accountability. I agree. I hope that we can have consistency on this floor when we're debating healthcare exchange and those things. We're taking this bill up tonight, and I hope we can see the same thing cross through in the concerns that this side of the aisle has on that issue. Thank you.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members. Representative Lenczewski, you know, it was great. We were able to pass the tax conformity bill off the House floor, and as I noted that day, I supported it. I think it was a good thing to have. And, you know, when we were looking at that whole issue, though, never in my wildest dreams did I expect this bill to come back with something with the IRRB on it. Truly, it's the good old boys club is back, and we are going to see the Iron Range and their delegation, since Senator Bach is the majority leader in the Senate, do this time and time again to us. Unless we say today that no, this is not right. This is not the right approach, especially since the bill here in the House hasn't even made it through all the committees. You know, last week we talked about the importance of having transparency, that we didn't want to bring things to the floor half-baked, and yet here we are today bringing a bill to the floor half-baked. The bill that is attached to this hasn't even gone through GovOps committee, and for anybody that's been here a while knows that anytime you're creating a board, what happens to it? It goes to GovOps. And here we're making significant changes to this board. Now, Representative Lenczewski, I know that Bach is having his Francis Underwood moment right now, but I do want to ask a couple of questions for perhaps Representative Moline. I understand this is your bill. Can you talk a little bit about...
Representative Moline will yield. Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can you talk a little bit about what is the quorum for the IRRB?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, I don't know exactly what you're referring to if you're talking about the number of members needed to pass or approve an action through the board. Sorry, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Moline, under your proposed language that you have here, what constitutes a quorum? What would it take to pass a measure out of this board under your proposal?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, just to be clear, the language that you have before you isn't my proposal. My proposal would end up consisting of 8 members, and it would take a majority in order to pass something at the board level. This language that's before you is 9 members, and again, it would just take a simple majority in order to pass an action at the board, although there are some higher standards if we are spending money out of certain funds.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to ask you one more question, Representative Moline, if you'll yield.
She will yield. Representative Anderson.
Can you tell me what, I think this number was bandied about a little bit earlier, but can you remind me again, what is the budget for the IRRB?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, we don't have a budget because we don't get state funding. Our money comes from the taconite production tax, which is a tax that mining companies pay in lieu of property taxes. It's based on the amount of tons of ore that they sell. That money is then collected and distributed to our local cities and municipalities through a formula.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Moline, I would hope that you would have a budget. I wasn't talking about what the state gives you in money. I'm asking how much the board divvies out in money on an annual basis from that. How do you operate? What's your you obviously have staff. What do you pay for staff? What is your overall budget for the IRRB?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, our basic budget every year is around $30 million. And again, it comes from the taconite production tax, which is on a 3-year average, so it isn't always the same amount of revenue that we're bringing in either.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Moline, can you tell me of that $30 million, is that all just, are you talking about how much is given out in grants and loans? And if not, of that $30 million, how much of that is given out as grants and loans to different groups?
Representative Moline will yield. Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, we don't give out a whole lot of grants. Most of what we do are low-interest loans to businesses for economic development. Sometimes those loans are forgiven if they've created a certain amount of full-time jobs. And our other spending goes to public works projects, to cities, because again, it's property tax money, so normally cities and towns are able to capture property tax money and they spend that on infrastructure, sewer, water, improvements to their local communities. And so in addition to our small business loans, we also give out public works spending, which goes to different municipalities within the taconite assistance area.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Moline, so out of that, how much is given out in loans and grants total? So is it the full $30 million, or are we talking about a different number?
Representative Moline will yield. Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Anderson, I don't have those figures in front of me right now. It does fluctuate, especially the public works spending, because it's based on what the cities and towns come to us requesting. So there is some variance. Our overall budget is $30 million a year. I can't say exactly how that is split down between small business loans and public works spending.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Moline, just one last question that I have for you.
She will yield. Representative Anderson.
How much do you receive, and how much do the members of the board receive in per diem?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Anderson. We receive mileage based on where our house is located from our agency headquarters, which is in Eveleth. So, for example, I live in Hibbing, which is about 20 miles from the headquarters in Eveleth, so I'm awarded per diem or mileage for driving to a board meeting and back from my house in Hibbing. And then I believe our per diem is set at the same level that legislators are set at per day.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Moline, for that information. You know what? I take it back. I have one more question for you.
Are you asking?
I'll get to that in a little bit. I guess what I want to say, and what I'm a little concerned about, Representative Moline, with this bill, which probably would have been heard if we had had an opportunity to hear this bill in other committees and actually gone through the process like it's supposed to. But what we're looking at here overall under this new structure, you would have 3 people. They would only need 3 people to decide on a $30 million budget. 3 people that are deciding for all of the Iron Range Taconite Assistance Area people on their budget. 3 people. So if the other people wouldn't be able to show up that day, under this language, we are only requiring that 3 out of the 13 members Isn't that correct? Let's see, is that the new deal? 3 people total that would make the decision. And members, I don't think that's probably a wise decision to make when you have 3 people making a decision on a $30 million budget that impacts all of the residents in the taconite assistance area. A couple other questions here. Representative Moline, if you could tell me a little bit.
Are you asking Representative Moline to yield?
I am. Thank you, Mr.
She will.
Speaker.
Representative Anderson.
Earlier you said that the reason behind this change was that the taconite assistance area had it changed the membership of the board because of redistricting. And as you know, I was chair of the redistricting committee, and I was looking at the map and I was comparing it to the population basis in these different legislative districts. And I know that we have confirmed for sure 5 members that would qualify under the 50% threshold. But I also see this as other members that could serve on here as well. If I'm looking at the population and if the boundary lines are right on what they have online, Senator Saxhog would also qualify. We've got for sure Representative Dill, Moline, Metza, Anzelk, and Tomasoni. But based upon this map, Saxhog would qualify as well. I think even Representative Radinovich would qualify under the 50% threshold. So can you tell me where you get your information on where that is, where that it's saying that they don't qualify for the 50% threshold? And can you disseminate that information to the members of the body, please?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Anderson. The information that I have comes from crunching numbers that came from the U.S. Census Bureau. Based on the percentage of our legislative districts within the taconite assistance area. House District 6A, which is me, I have 95% within the taconite assistance area. Senate District 6, Senator Tomasoni, 92%. House District 6B, Representative Metza, 90%. House District 5B, Representative Anzel, 74%. House District 3A, Representative Dill, 61%. And then the next House district would be 10B, Representative Joe Radinovich at 48%. The numbers that I have based on our legislative districts are that there are 4 House members and 1 senator that have more than 50% of their legislative districts within the taconite assistance area, meaning that only the 5 of us have a majority within the taconite assistance area. And under the current language, it is required that a majority of legislators that are seated to the board have a majority, and we're unable to meet that after redistricting.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, Representative Moline, nowhere did I hear you say that you actually checked with the GIS office. Nowhere have you looked at nonpartisan research to say whether this is accurate or not. You said that you went and you crunched the numbers. Well, I would hope that you would actually have gone to the GIS office and actually had them look at this with the boundary lines, that you had that in place. But, that's aside. Putting that aside, what I'm concerned with mostly is that instead of saying, okay, we're not going to make the 50% the threshold anymore, we're going to say it's going to be 45%. No. Instead, the alternative was, let's kick off the citizens from this board. The people that actually live in that area are going to boot them off because you want to make this all legislators. And I don't know, you weren't here at this time, Representative Moline, but the whole purpose of putting together this board in this format was to make sure that the citizens had a voice, that they had an opportunity to express their views on how this $30 million budget was spent. That's a lot of money. That's a lot of money. And what you've done is you've kicked them off completely. And how does this differ? You heard a couple of boards that already have citizen participation in. You've got 38 boards that I was able to find here right before session. 38 boards in the state of Minnesota that have citizen involvement. So we certainly as a state have taken the steps to say that it's important to have citizen participation. In fact, we have the LCCMR has citizen participation, the Lessard Sam's Outdoor Heritage Council, the Metropolitan Airports Commission, Minnesota Amateur Sports Commission, Nursing Home Administration Board, Public Utilities Commission. I could go on and on and on of these boards that actually have citizens participating in it. And I think that's a key element to have in this. And yet you've just booted them off with this legislation, which was done in some dark room off to the side without, as Representative, I'll quote Representative Anzelk said, no public participation and no hearings. I thought this was going to be about sunshine. I thought this was going to be about transparency. I thought this session was about getting greater public participation. And yet here we have today a piece of legislation that was tacked onto a bill without any of that. This is the wrong approach, folks. And you know what, Representative Lenczewski? This isn't about compromise. This is the fact that we're getting rolled by the Senate. And here it's what? Week 7. We haven't even talked about the budget issues, and they're already saying, hey, we're here, we're in control. This isn't about compromise. This is about one body ruling everything. Folks, this is our chance to take a stand. This is our chance to say, this is not how we operate. We are not going to say that this is going to be done in the dark room off to the corner somewhere, that we're going to have transparency, that we're going to have public participation in these things, and that it matters. So please vote for the Davids motion.
Representative Anzelk.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, we are not debating the Moline legislation. We are not debating here on the House floor the language of the Moline legislation, which is passed one committee and awaiting approval by a second committee. What we're discussing is a provision put into a larger bill without discussion, without public participation, and without the knowledge of the stakeholders, which are the people of northeastern Minnesota. Every single penny under the purview of the IRRR board is taconite production tax money. A paltry sum. A paltry sum of $2.42 a ton of a resource that does not grow back. Once it's gone, it's gone. And this fund, administered by this IRRR board, is the future for the people of northeastern Minnesota. It is the economic future for the people of northeastern Minnesota. And frankly, members, it's the same fund that folks in this chamber tried to steal from last year. $60 million of the future of northeastern Minnesota you attempted to take from the people. So we are not discussing the Moline legislation, which I've already said is a better remedy to the situation than is the provision that came over from the Senate. But let's be straightforward and blunt and honest about what we're talking about here. We're talking about property tax money. Property taxes. Mining companies pay no tax on their property. They pay a tax on production. Let's be clear about what this is. The Moline legislation is much preferable to the language that you have before you in this bill.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, we adopted some rules here in this chamber last week, and I asked folks to look at their watch and to write this time down, write this date down, because it was going to come back to bite us, and we're there. How these two amendments got on to the Senate bill was some folks came on, dropped them at the desk of the Secretary of the Senate. They got brought up. They got added on, which, by the way, is a privilege that we will no longer have because of the rules on Monday night. So I suspect this isn't the last of these kinds of things that we're going to have to deal with because of the way our rules are written. They're just going to keep adding stuff on and junking up those bills, and they're going to say, what's the House going to do? Are they going to take it in the name of tax conformity? Yeah, that's a good bill. Let's put it on there, because who'd want to vote against tax conformity in the state of Minnesota? And these bills are going to get junked up from us by the Senate. Representative Anzels, Representative Moline, Representative Metza, I don't think this is a conversation today at all about the IRBBB. I think this is an argument and a discussion today about tax conformity. Period. End of story. That's it. What we do on this is going to send a big billboard message to the Senate. Junk it on there, because right now the House has been on the floor for 45 minutes debating the IRBBB. Maybe we'll get to that later. I'm not sure where people are going to take the conversation. But you know what? I'd like to ask the Majority Leader to yield to a question, if she would.
She will yield. Representative O'Driscoll.
Madam Majority Leader, my question is, you had asked us, let me set it up and then I'll get to my question. You had said that these kinds of things that would come to the floor, at least in the House, are best dealt with when they go through committee and we do our work at the committee level and we bring clean legislation to the floor. And we have the 24-hour amendment filing and the 6-hour response to that, which, again, I could be wrong, but my understanding was that wasn't how the Senate did this. They just brought it in, put it up at the Secretary's desk, and those amendments came popping up as the President of the Senate saw fit, and they got tacked on there. Do we have a strategy going forward that we won't be seeing the Senate continue to do this for us?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members, and Representative O'Driscoll. Thank you for reminding us about the pre-filing amendment rule that we put into place last week that deals with how we're going to conduct our work here on the floor together as the Minnesota House of Representatives. I wish that I could say that the Senate is going to adopt that same rule. I don't know that they're going to. Not really my affair, because I serve in the Minnesota House of Representatives, as do you, and we're going to try and do our best job to make our process on the floor of the House as transparent as we can for the people of Minnesota so they can participate, and that's what that rule is about, and I think we'll accomplish that goal.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, Madam Majority Leader. I realize that we don't control the Senate, but it sounds like through the amendments that they're putting onto the bills that we send over to them, they're going to start controlling us. And I'm just wondering what we're putting up there as a shield or a barrier or a mechanism to deal with these kinds of things, because here we are in a major piece of legislation that, quite honestly, I don't think people with the IRRB, most people are concerned about. They just wanted to have a chance to go through our committee processes over here, get a chance to vet it out before it's amended on and sent over here from the Senate as a part of a missile that they're sending the House. I'm just wondering if you could tell us again what kind of defense, what kind of protocol are we going to have when those missiles come over here? Do we have an SDI that we're putting into place?
Are you asking Representative Murphy to yield?
Absolutely, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members, and Representative O'Driscoll. We are, of course, a House and a Senate, and when you ran for office, I'm pretty sure you knew about that. So we can control our behavior here, and we'll be talking about that today, of course, because we're going to deal with 159 amendments for 4 simple bills. That's an issue that we'll talk about here. I don't think we have to put up some sort of SDI, as you suggest. There are things that are going to come over from the Senate, and we're going to make decisions about that. Today we're going to make a decision about tax conformity, and because we think it is right for Minnesotans that we move this forward for middle-class Minnesotans so that they can get the tax relief, middle-class tax relief that comes with this bill, we're going to decide together if that's important. We'll take that vote.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill has now been sent back over to us, Madam Majority Leader, and my concern is that it's not been very transparent according to how we would do business. How are we making this transparent so that we can have the public have some kind of input on this? Both provisions that have been added on by the Senate as an amendment here today. And for the record, I did realize I was running for the House and knew the difference between the two chambers. Could the Madam Majority Leader yield to that question as to how we would deal with the transparency of this bill when it came back, because we're taking it as a whole here and folks haven't heard about it or had a chance to work on committee nor get public input in our committee process?
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, thank you, members, and Representative O'Driscoll. Again, as I will repeat one more time, we passed tax conformity off the floor. It went over to the Senate. They've added some provisions, and now we're going to make some decisions about what we think is the right policy for the state of Minnesota. I wish we could always control the Senate. We can't, but we can control ourselves in the work that we do here together. We've put a rule in place to make our process more transparent so Minnesotans can participate. We'll have more conversation about that today in the 159 amendments that have been filed for simple bills. But today, now, we have to make a decision about tax conformity, about middle-class Minnesotans and tax relief, and that's the question before us. It's a question of our judgment.
Representative O'Driscoll.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I said last week, I don't stand up on the floor very often. When I do, I think I have a point to make. And the point that I want to have folks walk away from this conversation with is if we have 159 amendments, I think it's because members want to make sure that every possibility of something that they can have added to a bill before it leaves this chamber and possibly ends up going over to the Senate for their work or going to a conference committee we've taken into consideration. Unfortunately, again, every member of this chamber and this body will not have those same privileges that the counterparts over in the Senate did, where they were able to put these two on and send them over to us as a missile. And again, we're put 159 amendments out there because we may not even need all of those, but we want to make sure that we cover our bases because that privilege has been taken away from us. Neither Moline, Anzels, or Metza would have the chance to be able to put that amendment on there. And we haven't heard from Representative Metza, but both Moline and Anzels have said it's not a big deal. We're just putting a simple amendment. That's what they did over in the Senate. But that simple amendment process that they both refer to is not available in this chamber. So I just want members to remember that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Metza.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I just want to concur with my colleagues on the other side of the aisle, and I will be a red vote today for the reasons that my constituents up north pay a majority of the money into this IRRB fund we're discussing, and I think it's unfair to them over the long term to vote any different. And I just would like to point that out. And as well point out that it was never the intention of myself, and I don't believe any of the other members of the House here that are members of the range delegation, to have this in coming to this body today to be decided this way. This was a low blow from the Senate and something that was not discussed with us, and hopefully we find some remedy for that.
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I wonder if Representative Hansen would yield for a question.
Representative Hansen will yield. Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Hansen, do you have any idea when the last time the Legislative Audit Commission audited the IRRB, or if they are scheduled to be audited anytime soon?
Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Are you speaking of a financial audit or the program evaluation audit?
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, Representative Hansen. Representative Hansen, I'm speaking of any audits at this point. I'm curious of what audits have been done of the IRRB in the past and what might be planned in the future, specifically on the financial audit, but actually looking at either one. Mr. Speaker, wondering if Representative Hansen would yield for a question relative to that.
He will yield. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Lenczewski, if I have a little time to look up on the computer, I believe we routinely do the financial audits in the same rotation as we do other agencies. So I believe there's been a financial audit probably within the last 3 years. If I have a little time, I could look that up. I know there was a special audit relating to an energy fund. I'm not sure which year that was. And I believe we've had program evaluation audits as well. So if you give me a little time, but I believe on the financial audit we've done it in our regular rotation.
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Hansen. I appreciate that. Well, members, I think this is a salient discussion. The IRRB has, as Representative Moline pointed out, and I think Representative Anzels and others may have pointed out, makes loans and grants to different companies in that part, in the northern part of the state, in the Iron Range area. One of those loans was to a company called Silicon Energy. It was a $1.5 million loan to a company to develop solar panels, and apparently the company was struggling. It is looking at restructuring its loan with the IRRB, so there was another vote taken apparently to somehow extend the terms of the loan. My point is, members, that the IRRB board makes decisions related to the financial integrity of the financial issues around the companies to which they service these grants and loans. And I think it's important for us to look at in the scope of the piece of legislation that seems to have drawn a lot of interest here today, and that is Section 6 of the bill that was added in the Senate. And Representative Moline, I understand it's not the legislation or the language you brought forward, but this is what's before us. And it appears to me that this amendment to our statutes would actually make it so that members of the House and Senate, upon their election to the House and Senate, would automatically be members of this IRRB board. Well, members, I think that may be taking us even further into problematic territory. Mr. Speaker, I would ask if Representative Moline would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Moline, one of the things that we do have access to is access to the campaign finance reports of each member of the House, and each individual ran against them. And I just wondered if you were aware that the parent company of Silicon Energy, which is called Newport Partners, I was wondering if you were aware of the fact that there were 7 employees of that parent company that contributed a total of $1,750 to your campaign over the last election cycle, including John J. Carroll, the vice president of the company. And as far as I can tell, it appears that all of these contributions are from individuals who work for the company located in San Clemente, California.
Representative Moline will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Drazkowski. Our decisions at the IRRB are not based on political contributions. Our decisions are based on economic development. There is a solar panel manufacturing plant located in Mountain Iron, which is not directly in my district, but borders my district pretty closely. And they do manufacture solar panels there. And I don't know how many employees they have right now, but I know that they're good living wage jobs and that several of my constituents work there. They are real jobs and they're making things, which I think is important. And we talk about here all the time how we're going to support manufacturing jobs and that we're going to support bringing good jobs to Minnesota. Our decisions at the agency go through a pretty extensive vetting process. We have a very skilled staff that works specifically on economic development, and that's how those decisions are normally made.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Moline. Well, Representative Moline, I appreciate your response, but really I'm curious to know whether you were aware that the parent company of, their name again is Silicon Energy.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Murphy, state your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Mason, Section 101, debate is limited to the question before the House. House File 6 is about tax conformity. Now we're talking about some company not related to the bill before us. and I would ask that the questioning cease and that we return to the debate of House File 6.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for advice.
State your advice, Representative Lenczewski.
Mr. Speaker, the line of questioning that I have offered is extremely salient to this. These companies are companies that benefit directly from the IRRB, either in the form of grants or loans. The one that I brought out was a $1.5 million loan in taxpayer money from the taxpayers of the state of Minnesota.
Members, Representative Murphy is correct in her statement that we should restrict our debate to the question before us, and I would just ask that members keep that in mind as we continue the debate. I won't rule on that point of order at this point.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I won't follow up any more with that line of questioning. But members, I will point out that there are additional members of this House and of the Senate who have received substantial financial campaign contributions from this company. As I mentioned, all of the individuals who contributed located in San Clemente, California. I believe, members, not only is the language that is in the Senate bill problematic, I believe it's problematic what we have right now, that we are placing members of the House and the Senate in a situation that they don't want to be in, or they might not even know they're in. But this language makes it even worse. The language that already exists in law says, members, that the people on the board, the legislators on the board, have to be appointed to the board. So at least there's the appointment process involved there. This would make it so that the individuals, upon their election to the legislature, would automatically be members of the IRRB board. There would be one less step between the decision for them to go on the board and what I see as a pile of campaign contributions that place a conflict of interest potentially among not only current members of the House and the Senate, but future members of the House and Senate. Members, I'd encourage that we entertain and vote for Representative David's motion to refuse to concur.
Representative Anzels.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, the IRRB board is first and foremost an economic development agency. It's an economic development agency blessed with production tax dollars that are in lieu of property tax dollars. The same auditing procedures and practices that virtually every municipality, every local unit of government must adhere to are followed at the IRRB. The same practices that are required for the cities of Wanamingo and Kenyon, Representative Lenczewski. The very same practices and policies.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Representative Anzels, I don't know that I can agree with your last statement, because the difference is that the municipalities of Wanamingo and Kenyon and those that you named are actually directly elected by the people. Members, this is a really big issue. We shouldn't be held hostage by the Senate. We spent hours and hours and hours last Monday talking about how important transparency was. And now what are we doing? We're taking a very controversial topic and we're just saying, well, the Senate put it on, therefore we can't be held accountable for not having transparency on this issue. Representative Anderson talked about it a little bit before, but I think one of the members said that the budget for the IRRB was $30 million. Well, the budget for the Met Council is $780 million, and that has citizen input. That is highly important. The rules that we passed last week say, 4.13, bills affecting state government power and structure. The Committee on Government Operations has jurisdiction over a House or Senate bill that establishes or reestablishes a department, agency, commission, board, task force, advisory committee, or council, or bureau, or other like entity. This is a board. This should come to the Government Operations and Elections Committee. This is a controversial topic. This isn't tax conformity. You shouldn't force members to take a vote on two separate issues. I want to give tax conformity to the people we voted for unanimously. But that's not what this is. This is skirting around the issue. This is a way that apparently the majority plans to skirt around the process that they put in place. This needs to go to the Government Operations Committee. This needs to be voted on separately. This isn't right, members. And we're going to have this problem all session, and I can't believe we're going this direction, and I encourage you to reject it. We can send this bill to conference committee. It would take, as Representative David said, a few minutes to take this out, and then we can go through the proper committee process. We do not need to be told by the Senate that this is how we're going to do things. We are the House. We all have election certificates. We do not have to do what they say. And if we're going to, every time that we have an issue that we decide that we don't want to, we don't want to pretend like we don't want to seem like we're not transparent in the House, so then we'll just pass it off to the Senate, and then the Senate ram it through, and then when it gets to the floor, we'll just say, oh, well, gee, well, it's not our fault. The Senate wasn't transparent, but we're transparent. It's not right. Members, hold yourselves accountable and follow the process that apparently the majority wanted 1 week ago today. Members, I ask that you vote to refuse to concur David's motion. Thank you.
Representative Franzen. Okay. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Obviously, this is a bill that we passed off the House floor unanimously. I thought that it probably would be a great opportunity for us to set the tone here in St. Paul, that we actually did come to work together. But as often is a suspect here in St. Paul, we've added some other stuff onto the bill. And now we've taken something that passed off the floor unanimously and we've made it political. And we didn't do it, I guess. The Senate did it to us. But we have an obligation here to represent our constituents, and you know, I talked last week about doing the right thing. Here's our opportunity, members. But if the majority leader would yield for a question, Mr. Speaker.
She will yield. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, last week on Thursday, one of my members was approached by someone from the majority party and asked if they would serve on a conference committee for this bill. I think the original intent was that we were going to not concur and this was going to go to conference committee. We were expecting, the minority party was expecting a motion to not concur to come to the floor on Thursday. Can you fill us in, Madam Majority Leader, on what happened?
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Doubt. I don't have any knowledge of the conversation that you're referring to.
Okay.
Representative Doubt.
Certainly. You know, and I think this points out a great question, because we've heard tonight that you know, we need to, in the fashion of expediency, pass this bill along, whether we agree with what's in it or not, whether we agree with what the Senate did or not. That middle-income Minnesotans need this tax relief, and people want to file their tax returns. So we need to go ahead and pass this tonight. Unfortunately, there's a couple of other things that have been added into the bill. So let's just go ahead and keep this thing moving. Well, that sounds great. But we had the opportunity. We could have concurred last Thursday. The Senate was done with this last Thursday. We also could have moved not to concur. And my thinking is something must have happened between last Thursday and today that now all of a sudden we're moving to concur. I don't know what that is. Unfortunately, the public in Minnesota does not know what that is. There wasn't transparency. We're told that in an effort of expediency we need to do this now. But nobody knows. We don't know. The public doesn't know why we didn't do this in a transparent fashion. And we do have a process, members. Send it to conference committee. We notice for public hearing. The public can come in and have input where there's a debate to work out the differences between the House and the Senate. Transparency. You guys are going to get sick of me saying that word this session. Transparency. And believe me, you're probably going to regret having ever said it yourselves. This isn't transparency. We're going to take citizens off of a board, appointed citizens, to put politicians on? because they deal with tax dollars? Would Representative Moline yield for a question?
Representative Moline will yield for a question. Representative Dowd.
I think what I heard was $30 million budget. 31. You know, you've got citizens, and I know this isn't your bill, Representative Moline, but I did hear Representative Ansel say that your bill is actually better than this one. Join me. Let's send this thing to conference committee. Let's have some hearings. Maybe your bill is better. Let's take that. But this isn't the only place that we have citizens spending tax dollars. I mean, do you agree the same thing would be the case for the Met Council? I mean, that's $606 million. I think actually if you add all their money together, it's $750 million. Those are appointed people. Should we also remove those people from the Met Council?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Dowd. I don't represent the metro area, so I will be honest that I don't know all that much about the Met Council. I personally think that boards, councils, or committees that are spending taxpayer dollars should be accountable to the public through the election process. But because I don't represent the metro, I can't speak about the Met Council directly. I can only speak about the board that I'm familiar with.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Representative Moline. And it's a little unfair for me to put you on the spot and ask you that question. But they spend 20 times more money. Actually, more than that. Appointed members. And we're going to take them off without having transparency. Without having public hearings. We're going to take them off the IRRB board. Members, it's your responsibility as members of this body to send this thing to conference committee. I called the governor last week on Thursday and I said, you know what, Governor? We don't need to take a bill that passed off of the House floor unanimously. This is our first step together. We don't need to take a bill and make it political. And I made an offer to the governor at that point, and I'll make it to you right now. As the minority, we will vote to suspend the rules if we need to move things along quicker, but let's send this thing to conference committee. Let's have hearings, transparent hearings, where the public can come and give input on these changes. And then we can bring it back. We can move it quick. I know we're in a hurry. But we were in a hurry last Thursday when we had the opportunity to either concur or not concur then. And between last Thursday and today, we could have not concurred Thursday, held our conference committee over the weekend, and we could be back here today with a bill, with an agreement, a conference committee report. There would have been transparency, the public would have had input, but today we're moving a bill that didn't have any transparency on these, you know. What do people hate back in your district about what we do in St. Paul? They hate when we do this. Take a bill that's non-controversial, passes off the House floor unanimously, and we add stuff to it, political stuff, stuff that didn't, you know, smoky backroom deals. This isn't the way we should operate. All of you that stood up and said you wanted transparency when we passed our House rules, this is your opportunity to stand up for transparency. Vote green on the motion to refuse to concur, and let's send this to conference committee.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Let's just get this straight real quick. This is nothing about speeding up conformity. If you wanted to speed up conformity, you'd send it back to conference committee, roll the Senate, come back, get this thing down so people don't have to file their taxes twice. This has nothing to do with speeding up, so let's get that clear for the record right now. I'm just amazed. The minority leader was just talking about last Thursday. We could have done then. I had the declaring an emergency. We could have done it a month ago. And all of a sudden today we're feeling the need for speed. We're feeling the need for speed. Well, let's slow down just a little bit here, folks. And Representative Ansels, you are one great American, I got to say. But I just want to correct something you said. You said, and I'm paraphrasing, every penny for the IRRB comes from the taconite production. That's not correct. And the reason you need the 3 citizens on the board is because in 2010, for example, this legislature in the budget gave $6.7 million to the IRRB. That's money from the general fund, the 22 cents. That money comes out of the general fund and over. And folks, the only reason I know about this, I usually used to just, many, many years ago, just let the IRRB do their thing, stay out of the range. You're just a lot safer that way. But as tax chair, I had time after time after time when members on this side of the aisle and some on that side of the aisle wanted to do things to the range. Well, you know what? I didn't let them. I didn't let them. I saved that. That's why we need citizen membership on that board, is because $6.7 million comes out of the general fund. It's not all from the taconite tax. I kind of feel like we're supposed to vote for this bill so we can find out what's in it. I don't want to do that. I'm getting to find out what's in it because we're doing committee work here on the floor, which is something we didn't want to do. The way I understand the bill as I've read it here today is that we would remove citizen members. There are some of you that served with Representative Joe Begich. He was awesome. You want him off the board? You want to look him in the eye and say, you're off the board, Joe? I'm not doing that. This is the anti-Rukavina bill. Rukavina couldn't serve on the board. Well, I mean, that's not all bad, but, whatever. And Representative Murphy, you're declaring transparency just ain't selling over here. You got something you're trying to sell. It ain't selling. Because this was not a transparent process. I don't know what they did. I don't know if the issue is, I don't know if the Moline bill is good. This isn't the Moline bill. It's worse than the Moline bill. I don't know if this stuff's good or not. I don't know. Because we haven't worked the committee process. The Moline bill apparently is still in GovOps, hasn't been heard. So don't give me the transparency stuff. That doesn't wash. And I would just, I have to ask, where is your transparency on this? Where is it? Smoke-filled room in the dark of night. For all I know. I don't know. I don't know where this stuff was heard. I don't know where the Senate decided these things. Mr. Speaker, this is very important. We can take care of this very quickly. I'd ask for a call to the House.
Seeing 10 hands, there will be a call of the House.
And Mr. Speaker, I just got one of these...
Representative Davids?
Yes, sir.
Representative, the clerk will take the roll on the call of the House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members.
Representative Murphy moves that further proceedings under the roll call be dispensed with and that the Sergeant-at-Arms be instructed to bring in the absent members. All in favor say aye. All opposed no. The motion prevails. The clerk will close the roll and the Sergeant-at-Arms will bring in the absent members. Representative Davids.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would just like to share an email that I just received. It was copied to myself, Representative Dill, Representative Murphy, and it's regarding House File 6. And it says, "Good day. I feel the House File 6 removes a portion of my community from the IRRB board under Moline's bill. I would ask to keep the board as status quo or send it to conference committee for a better bill. Randy Bolin, Mayor of Two Harbors." So... for the range delegation, you may want to call the mayor quick, and he's behind me. He's with me. He's with me all the way here. He says send this thing back to conference, and let's get it right. Thank you.
Representative Erickson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. The 2002 audit, financial audit by the Office of the Legislative Auditor, discovered 17 findings in the financial audit, and I think that's relevant to bring up because one of the main findings was that there was no conflict of interest policy. So when two things have been added to House File 6, a tax conformity bill, and one of them is changing the makeup of the board of the IRRR agency, and there are still findings in this audit report that we're not sure have been resolved. I think we have some very serious discussions to have. That's why, members, we should send this back to conference. Please vote not to concur.
Seeing no further discussion, members, we are on a motion not to concur. A green vote would be to not concur and send the bill to conference committee. A red vote would be not to do that. So the clerk will take the roll on the motion. The clerk will close the roll. There being 60 ayes and 68 nays, the motion does not prevail.
Lenczewski moves that the House concur in the Senate amendments to House File 6 and that the bill be repassed as amended by the Senate.
I recognize the author, Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you, members. I want to encourage everyone to vote yes. I do want to thank the governor for his support in working with the House on federal conformity. I want to thank the Senate as well. I know they have a little difference of opinion, but again, members, it's time to compromise for the good of filers, to do what's best. We need to get past not being able to get things done, and our vote today, I believe, will be unanimous or close to it, and we can pass on this tax relief to our constituents. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Any discussion? Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Moline yield to a question or two?
Representative Moline will yield to a question. Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Moline, there was some earlier discussion on the floor, and you mentioned since you're not from the Metro, you didn't really want to hazard an opinion on the Met Council, but there are quite an extensive list of committees that we have citizens on, and I think rightly so. And so I will go through some of this list, which are statewide, which you should, in representing, I assume, be able to give an opinion. But are any of these committees ones that you would not want to replace the citizens with, as this, concurrence would do to this one committee, such as the Board on Judicial Standards, Campaign Finance and Public Disclosure Board, the Clean Water Council, the Lessard-Sams Outdoor Heritage Council, Medical Practice Board, Minnesota Humanities Commission, Minnesota Zoological Board? Are any of these ones that you don't think we should replace the citizens on, such as concurring with this motion would do to this board that is part of your area?
Representative Moline.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Quam. I was only talking about my bill, which again is not the bill that we have in front of us, but in regards to the non-elected members on the IRRB. Nobody in this room is a taxpayer that pays into the taconite production tax that we spend at the IRRB on projects. That money comes from the mining companies, and again, it's money that they pay in lieu of property taxes. But if we are spending $31 million a year, I do believe that members should be accountable to the public through the election process. That's my personal opinion on how the IRRB operates, that members who are there, who are spending tens of millions of dollars every year, should be accountable to the voters through the election process. That's why the language in my bill is set up so that elected representatives and senators who represent the taconite assistance area, which is the area served by the IRRB, would have a say on the board, and therefore the voters would have a say on who's on the board and making decisions on their behalf.
Representative Quam.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, it wasn't quite as enlightening as I'd hoped, but you know, there are times where I vote not just for my constituents, but for the citizens of the state as a whole. And, you know, on precedents and on, you know, policies, because if we allow certain changes without the debate, then I think we're not doing what I would consider, I wouldn't be doing service to the citizens. And, you know, frankly, I guess we're not supposed to refer to the other body, even though this is the other body's listed up on the screen. But if things like this can get thrown in and we don't iron them out, we don't allow debate in the House, I think that this body is weakened in stature, and it saddens me. So I will not be voting to concur on this bill, this motion.
Representative Davids.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. It's with a sad heart that I have to announce that I'm voting red on this bill. I pushed hard for House File 6. I had a similar bill. Representative Lenczewski did a great job on House File 6. But if this House is going to get rolled by the Senate, I want no part of it, because that's exactly what's happening. We had to do committee work on the floor. There's a bill sitting in GovOps on the IRRB issue. This was not the place for it. Representative Lenczewski said there has to be compromise. Members, I have made hundreds of deals in my life, and I don't always get what I want, and yes, at times I compromise. But every time I compromise, I get something for it. If Representative Lenczewski was at her chair, which she's not, I would ask her to yield and ask her the question. You said compromise. Representative Lenczewski? If Representative Lenczewski would yield.
Representative Lenczewski will yield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to my good friend, Chair Lenczewski, you mentioned the word compromise. I guess my definitions are just a bit cloudy here. If we compromised, what did we compromise on? I know accepting all the Senate bad stuff we're compromising on, but you said we compromised. What did we get for that compromise?
Representative Lenczewski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Davids. What we got was federal conformity. And I think I can't make that any clearer to folks here. If you want to go back and look at the calendar on when the Senate introduced federal conformity or had a hearing, I think you'll know what we're getting here. Federal conformity. That's what we're getting. And so I guess members still don't know what that is. So, Mr. Speaker, to Representative David's question, here's what we're getting. We're extending the higher education tuition deduction for folks who have kids qualified tuition deductions. We're extending the educator classroom expense deduction. This helps all our teachers who use their own money to buy things in the classroom, and they can get a tax deduction for that. We're extending the authority for individuals over 70 and a half or older to transfer up to $100,000 from an IRA or Roth IRA directly to a qualified charity, and this helps our charities in Minnesota. We're extending the increase in the federal adjusted gross income tax limit on the amount of qualified conservation easements that may be claimed as a charitable deduction. We're extending various provisions related to depreciation and expensing for our businesses. Members, we are allowing airline employees who receive bankruptcy payments to retroactively roll over payments into IRAs, and indeed I extended that further for Representative Davids. Members, if you want to, if you would like me to run you over the summary, if you would like me to run you over the spreadsheet that shows you the $18.5 million of tax cuts we're going to give to middle Minnesotans, if you want me to show you the list of the 250,000 filers, these are not one person. If you're filing jointly, you're called one filer. What we're getting is conformity, members. What we're getting is conformity, members. I think you all can think about what was going on as it relates to the other branches of government and the other body as far as where this was on the list of priority, where was it in a budget proposal, where was it in the conversation. The House bipartisanly led the way to ensure that all Minnesotans would receive federal conformity. And if folks think that that was going to happen without compromise, I think we're all kidding ourselves. Members, I am really confounded as to the positions people are going to take here, I guess, in the final vote. I will tell you, members, this is exactly what I think Minnesotans want us to do. I'm not one and never have been one who thinks compromise is a dirty word. I proudly will compromise to put Minnesotans first. Members, please support the motion to concur.
Representative Davids.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd love to negotiate a business deal with you, Representative Lenczewski, because your compromise is getting something you already would have had. The Senate was going to do that. They were playing hardball and saying they weren't going to do it. They were going to do it. You're negotiating against yourself. We would have gotten all those things. What we're getting here, yeah, we're getting some good things. But I'm going to vote today to stand up for this House, to stand up for the process, and not to get rolled by the Senate. Members, if you want to get on the Bachmobile, go ahead and vote green. I am not getting on the Bachmobile.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Again, we've got an opportunity to send a message. Let's do the right thing and send this bill to conference committee. And we do that now by voting against this motion to concur. You know, when this IRRB board was set up, it was actually tripartisan. It was Moe, Svigum, and Ventura when we set this up originally. And now we're going to make some changes. We're going to pull citizens off of this board, and we're going to do it without transparency. And I'm not sure that's the right message that we want to send to Minnesota. So I'm going to encourage you to vote against the motion to concur. Let's send this thing to conference committee, and let's do it with real transparency so people on the Iron Range and everywhere in Minnesota can have real input in the process. Not smoky back rooms in the dark of night. Let's have real transparency. This is your opportunity. Vote red on the motion to concur.
Representative Hertas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I withdraw my intention to speak.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of the motion to concur say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. No. The motion prevails. The clerk will give the bill a third reading as amended by the Senate.
Third reading, House File 6, as amended by the Senate.
Further discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Erickson changes her vote to aye. Representative Erickson, I apologize. Representative Gruenhagen changes his vote to aye. So there being 109 ayes and 19 nays, the bill is repassed as amended by the Senate and its title agreed to. Calendar for the day.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move that the call of the House be lifted.
Representative Murphy moves that the call of the House be lifted. All in favor of that motion say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. First bill on the calendar for the day is House File 19. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 19, number 1 on the calendar for today, an act relating to probate.
The author of the bill, Representative Hortman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to move that House File 19, now on the calendar for the day, be referred to the Civil Law Committee. We need to adopt an amendment, and I would like to do that work in committee.
Discussion to Representative Hortman's motion to re-refer. Seeing no discussion, all those in favor of the motion say aye. Aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 141. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 141, number 4 on the calendar for today, an act relating to elections.
The member from Washington, Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask for your support for House File 141. The state of Minnesota has a timeline for this type of governance. When the August primary date was moved, the dates that are in this bill should have been moved, but they were overlooked. This bill would reconcile the timeline with the rest of the state redistricting times. It's non-controversial and bipartisan, and I ask for your vote. Vote green.
Discussion to the bill. There are amendments at the desk. The clerk will report the first amendment.
Doubt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A37.
Representative Doubt, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Actually, I'd like to yield to Representative Torkelson to talk about this amendment.
Representative Doubt, you have to ask Representative Torkelson a question. You can't just yield the floor to him.
Will Representative Torkelson yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Torkelson, could you introduce this amendment for us?
Thank you, Representative Doubt, and Mr. Speaker and members. This is a good idea, and if it's a good idea for Washington County, why would we single out just one county in the state of Minnesota? Let's do it for all of the metro counties. This amendment would subject the rest of the metro counties to the same treatment, fair treatment across metro counties, with a very good idea. Ask for a green vote on the amendment.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Ward.
I believe I had the floor, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Doubt, you did. Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate Representative Torkelson's description, and I'd request a roll call vote on the amendment.
A roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the amendment. Representative Ward.
Mr. Speaker, this bill does not address those kinds of things. It's not appropriate.
Any further discussion? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 50 ayes and 73 nays, the motion has not prevailed. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A38.
Representative Doubt, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If Representative Swedzinski would yield for a question.
He will yield. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Swedzinski, if you could give us a description on this amendment.
Representative Swedzinski.
I would like to withdraw the amendment.
Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to withdraw this amendment.
Representative Doubt withdraws his amendment. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment. Representative Carlson.
Yes, I'd like to rise for a point of personal privilege.
State your point of personal privilege.
Mr. Speaker, earlier this afternoon, Representative Garofalo made some kind comments about the debate we had the other day, and I just want him to know that I very much appreciate those comments. Thank you.
There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A67.
Representative Doubt, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Torkelson yield?
Representative Torkelson will yield. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Torkelson, if you could introduce this one.
Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This amendment would make this effective date the day following the final enactment. Would Representative Ward yield for a question?
Representative Ward will yield for a question. Representative, one moment. Representative Ward can't yield for a question because you've yielded to a question to Representative Doubt.
Thank you. I withdraw my request, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd request a roll call on this amendment.
A roll call being requested. Are there 15 hands? Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the amendment. Representative Ward.
Members, I encourage you to vote no.
Further discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. Members, please vote.
No.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 51 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A68.
Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And, sorry, I'm just getting the amendment myself. Would Representative McNamara yield for a question?
Representative McNamara will yield. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative McNamara, if you could give us a brief description on what this amendment does.
Representative McNamara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members and Representative Doubt. What this would do is this would allow a farmer that lives in the district may have a substantial operation in that district. It would allow them to have a vote and a voice in the process of electing the Soil and Water Conservation District supervisors, and it would be a good thing, and I would appreciate your support. And I'd ask for a roll call, Mr. Speaker.
Representative McNamara requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Discussion to the amendment. Representative Ward.
Mr. Speaker, I encourage members to vote no.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 50 ayes and 72 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A1.
Representative Doubt, your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll withdraw this amendment.
Representative Doubt withdraws the amendment. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A2.
Representative Doubt, your amendment.
Was that the A2 amendment?
The A2 amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to, I think rather than ask him to yield, I think Representative Drazkowski would like to speak to the A2 amendment.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Representative Doubt, members, this provision would actually allow for a reverse referendum. I appreciate your support.
Further discussion to Representative Anderson.
Mr. Speaker, we do not have this at our desk yet, and I'd like to be able to look at it first, please.
All right. The amendment, I believe, is going to be distributed.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative Doubt.
I'd like to request a roll call on this amendment.
Representative, a roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Is there any further discussion of the amendment while we're waiting? Representative Pepin. Okay. Yeah. Representative Purcell.
Don't have that amendment, the A2, yet?
It's being distributed, Representative Purcell. Any further discussion to the amendment? Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will Representative Drazkowski yield?
He will yield. Representative Anderson.
Representative Drazkowski, I'm just quickly trying to read through this. Can you tell me if this would apply to some of the legislation that Representative Myra has passed in last legislative session to catch expenditures, buyouts of people that have been terminated from an office? Can you tell me if that's what this does?
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, I don't believe it does. This is when a district expends more than $100,000. And it relates, Representative Anderson, to the bill which deals with soil and water conservation districts.
Further discussion to the amendment? Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. There being 48 ayes and 74 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A4.
Representative Doubt, to your amendment.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to withdraw this amendment.
Representative Doubt withdraws the A4 amendment. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Doubt moves to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A5.
Representative Doubt, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll just take a minute here to, I think people are still waiting for this amendment. I don't have it yet at my desk, so. And I believe Representative Pepin has a comment on this one.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I actually am just a little confused about the bill, and I was wondering if Representative Ward would yield to a...
We're on the A5 amendment. That's the order of business we're on, Representative Pepin. To the A5 amendment.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't hear what Representative Doubt had said. He was yielding to me for the A5 amendment. I offer the A5 amendment.
Representative Doubt already offered the A5 amendment.
Oh, okay. Well, the A5 amendment just says it is necessary to obtain the consent of the majority of fee owners within the district before the additional area is annexed to a district.
Further discussion to the amendment. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I encourage members to vote no.
Representative McNamara.
Mr. Speaker, I don't think any of us have the A5.
Representative Pepin is looking at the A5. Representative Murphy has the A5. Do members not have the A5? People seem to have the A5. We'll get one to Representative Fabian quick. Okay. And Representative Zellers. Okay. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request a roll call on this amendment.
Representative Doubt requests a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Dill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I have to stand up and ask a question of Minority Leader Doubt.
Representative Doubt will yield to a question? He will yield. Representative Dill.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and Representative Doubt. The members on the committee that this bill went directly from to the General Register, and by the way, it took 9 minutes and 58 seconds to get this bill out of the Environment Policy Committee into the General Register. And Representative Cornish, Fabian, Green, Hackbarth, and McNamara and Uglum were all in attendance. And Representative McNamara is the only person that's given a amendment on the floor, of which actually you have submitted. And then you ask another member to give a presentation on the bill. So we're going around the Republican caucus. And as you know, I don't play games in my committee. I hear your bills and I hear their bills. and we pass your bills, and every game and fish bill, or every bill that, while I have been the chairman of a committee, I have had almost exactly equal number of bills, Republican and Democrat, because those are the ones that made good sense. But it's very obvious that this is quite disorganized and going to take a lot of time. So, Mr. Speaker, under Rule Point 3.10(8), after this amendment, each amendment that is offered on the bill, I intend to stand up and to make a motion to postpone indefinitely each and every amendment. Thank you.
Representative, any further discussion to the amendment? Representative Sanders.
Mr. Speaker, would Representative Dill yield for a question?
He will yield. Representative Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Dill, I just didn't hear what you said at that last one. Could you repeat the rule?
Representative Dill.
Yes, Representative Sanders. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe it's under Procedures and Motions 3.10, number 8, to postpone indefinitely. So, in my understanding, that an amendment is a motion. And because this bill took 9 minutes 58 seconds, and the members that are on the committee and heard the bill and sent it directly to the General Register aren't really making any substantial amendments by them, and I certainly understand how many would like to do this, but when the minority leader stands up, makes the motion with an amendment to the House floor, and then ask another member to present it time and time and time again, I'm not thinking those are really substantive amendments. And so I have notified you that very soon I'm going to start operating or requesting under 3.10, number 8, what my intentions are. So I just wanted to share that with you, and we'll see where that goes.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. And it's certainly not my intent to delay things or cause a problem. I think we're all trying to adjust to the new rules. In fact, we had quite a conversation, the majority leader and I, late last week. Thursday and Friday, I visited her in her office Thursday evening. We discussed how these rules would be implemented. One of the things that I had seen that potentially could have been a problem, and I think we might be seeing that might be a problem, and our intent here isn't to put additional burden on staff, but that we allow the amendments to be pre-filed as normal, and then on the day of the session, that we allow members to actually sign their name to those amendments and turn them in at the desk. So they've met the pre-filing rule, and then they get turned in at the desk. You can add co-signers just the way we do now, and then the amendments could be brought up in that order. Certainly right now, the way this rule is operating, the Speaker has the ability to pull them up in the order that he chooses. My intent isn't, I think we're going to withdraw some of these amendments, and as soon as I get a second here, I'll probably do that. However, difficult for me to do that as I'm referring to each amendment. So I think what we intended was that these amendments would be offered by other members, but at the time when we submitted the amendments, we didn't know and it wasn't clear yet how these rules would be implemented, so I think that's maybe what we're running into, and it's certainly not my intent to slow things down. But as they come up, I guess I can withdraw them. If we can think of a quicker process, we can certainly do that.
Representative Pepin to the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Ward yield to a question?
Representative Dill?
Ward.
Oh, Representative Ward will yield to a question. Representative Pepin.
Mr. Speaker, Representative Ward, you indicated that you were against this amendment. In the last few amendments, you just said to vote no, and I'm wondering if you could explain why you're against the majority of fee owners within the district having consent or giving consent.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm sorry, Representative Pepin, I lost about the last half of your statement or your question.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Ward, I'm just simply, you'd mentioned that you were against this, you were against a few others, you just simply said no, vote against them, and I'm wondering why you don't think it's necessary to get the consent of a majority of fee owners within the district. And if you could just elaborate for me as to why you're against this amendment, that would be helpful.
Representative Pepin, and Representative Ward is certainly can feel free to answer the question, but it's actually against our rules to ask someone why they're voting or not voting for a particular bill. Representative Ward.
I'm sorry, Mr. Speaker. I am to answer the question or not?
You can explain why you think this is a bad amendment, certainly.
Okay, it is certainly a bad amendment. Wasn't it this?
I didn't mean to judge the amendment. Sorry.
Let's put it this way, Mr. Speaker. Thank you. It's not a helpful amendment. It doesn't speak to anything that we heard in committee or the testimony provided by the public officials that came and did testify for both elections and the Environmental Natural Resources Policy Committee.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I appreciate your comments earlier. It would be very helpful, since these amendments are coming very quickly, to understand what the opposition is, why they're not viewed as a good amendment. That's the only reason I asked Representative Ward. Just saying no doesn't shed a lot of light as to why the amendments are a bad idea.
Seeing no further discussion to the amendment,
Yes.
the clerk will take the roll on the amendment. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Faust votes no. There being 47 ayes and 76 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. Representative Daudt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to withdraw all of my amendments with the exception of A1 and A3 on this bill.
Representative Daudt withdraws all his amendments except the A1 and the A3. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Daudt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A3.
Representative Daudt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe that Representative Drazkowski would like to speak to this amendment.
Representative Drazkowski.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, this builds some accountability and transparency into the bill by adding a Section 2 at the end of the bill that requires the Soil and Water Conservation District to annually provide a list of real or personal property acquired in the previous year to all voters within that district. It also requires them to post it on the district's website. Members, this brings accountability and, as I mentioned, transparency, as the soil and water districts do engage in land purchases. It's responsible to the people of Minnesota to know what their local soil and water district is doing. I encourage your support for the amendment.
Representative Daudt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to request a roll call on this amendment.
Representative Daudt asks for a roll call. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a good bill. It was written the way that it was intended to, and I ask for your vote for the bill and against the amendment.
Further discussion. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the amendment.
A1? I don't think we ever recorded. I recorded it.
The clerk will close the roll. There being 50 ayes and 73 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There is another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Daudt moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A1.
Representative Daudt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I believe Representative Woodard would like to speak to this amendment.
Representative Woodard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And what the A1 amendment does is it adds some very important language about consent of the Board of the District where the area proposed for the detachment is not required if the area proposed at the time the
Representative Murphy,
petition is
what
filed.
purpose do you rise?
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
State your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, under Rule 3.21, motions and propositions must be germane. The A1 amendment greatly expands the scope of Representative Ward's bill, and it contains sections of law that are not contained in Representative Ward's bill, and I would ask that you rule it out of order.
Discussion to the point of order. Representative Woodard, what purpose do you rise?
Advice to the Speaker. I believe it is in order. I mean, it is Minnesota Statute 123A.45, Subdivision 2, and we are talking about elections here, about consent of boards, where we would like to look at school boards or school districts as well as soil and conservation districts. So I think it is germane to the discussion we're having here regarding this bill.
Having heard the advice of Representative Murphy and Representative Woodard, I find that the point of order is well taken. There's another amendment at the desk.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to appeal the ruling of the Speaker and roll call that.
We're already on to the next order of business, Representative Woodard, but there being 15 hands, there being 15 hands, there will be a roll call. The question before the body is, shall the decision of the Speaker stand as the judgment of the House? A green vote supports the ruling of the Speaker. A red vote goes against the ruling of the Speaker. Seeing no discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 73 ayes and 49 nays. Representative Franzen votes no. So 73 ayes and 50 nays. It is the judgment of the House that the Speaker's ruling shall stand. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Torkelson moving to amend House File 141 as follows. The amendment is coded A38.
Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you for allowing this amendment to be allowed. We have to apologize a little bit because we're having a little trouble working with these new rules and just how they're supposed to operate. This amendment was originally submitted with Representative Doubt's name on it. I struck out Representative Doubt's name and placed my own name in place of his name, and I'm happy that you are allowing us to introduce this amendment in this way. It gives us a little clearer understanding of just how these new and very confusing rules are going to work as we move forward in our business here on the House floor. In reference to the amendment itself, if Representative Ward would yield for a question.
She will yield. Representative Torkelson.
Thank you, Ward. This section of law deals with the membership of our soil and water conservation boards and whether or not they should be elected by districts. The amendment would allow us to have districts in all counties in the state, and I'd like you to explain why this is good for Washington County and not good for the rest of the state.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just learned that there is a bill with Representative Hansen, and he's inviting you to sign on to his bill because it takes care of a lot of these things that you're talking about. I would encourage you to vote no on the amendment.
Representative Torkelson.
Well, thank you, Representative Ward, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Ward, seems like we could take care of that business right now and save Representative Hansen the trouble of arguing his bill in committee. I'd urge a green vote on the amendment.
No.
Representative Doubt.
I just wanted to confirm that a roll call had been requested.
You've requested one right now, so if there's 15 hands,
perfect.
There will be a roll call. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Yeah, members, this is on the amendment. Clerk will close the roll. There being 51 ayes and 72 nays, the motion does not prevail. The amendment is not adopted. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 141.
Third reading. Further discussion to the bill. Representative Kiefer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would just ask members to support the bill. Thank you.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would the author of the bill yield for a question?
She will yield. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the author of the bill, can you just restate for members of the body what your bill does?
Representative Ward.
In the most simple terms, it changes the period of time before the election from 30 days to 80 days. And there was a conflict created when the redistricting was done. And with that, this particular law was not addressed in the redistricting like the others were. It was overlooked, and we've been asked to rectify that, keep it coincidental with the other bills.
Representative Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker, would the author yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker, and to the author, with regards to the change from 30 days to 80 days, what is it that's being changed? And I understand it caused a conflict, but can you elaborate on that?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will give you as much as I can in terms of the consequences. There wasn't time for people with the redistricting and the guidelines for applying for the commission to actually apply to vote, to be elected. So we need more time.
Representative Garofalo.
Mr. Speaker, would the author yield for another question?
She will yield. Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And to the author, what commission? I'm sorry, I thought this was with regards to the Soil and Water Board. What is the commission reference?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Garofalo, I'm sorry if I misspoke. It is the Soil and Water Conservation Board.
Representative Garofalo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to the author.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Ward yield?
She will yield. Representative Pepin.
Representative Ward, could you tell me when is the enactment date of this legislation?
Representative Ward.
Or is it upon?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Pepin, it's August 1st when the governor signs the bill.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Ward continue to yield?
She will yield. Representative Pepin.
Representative Ward, if this is truly a problem, I'm just curious as to why we want to wait till August and why we wouldn't want to make it effective the day following final enactment.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Pepin, in this case, because it's not an election year, it could be tomorrow, it could be December 31st. You know, it's August 1st.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Ward continue to yield?
She will. Representative Pepin.
Representative Ward, I'm disappointed that the earlier amendment, that the 67 amendment, would have made it right away. So I think if it's really a problem, we should always try to fix it right away. My question is, why 80 days? Why not 70, 90, 45?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Pepin, I believe that's consistent with the other similar bills or statutes for the timing.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and Representative Ward. Would Representative Ward continue to yield?
She will. Representative Pepin.
I'm sorry. Which similar to which statutes? Or I'm not sure what you said. If you could just clarify that.
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The statutes relating to county elections are all consistent according to the state guidelines.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I just have one more question for Representative Ward.
She'll yield. Representative Pepin.
Thank you. Representative Ward, does this have a Senate file as well?
Representative Ward.
No, it does not.
Representative Pepin.
I'm sorry. The number is 215.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Ward, where is it at in the process in the Senate?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to comment on what the Senate is doing.
Representative Pepin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Ward, that's an okay answer. It is helpful to sort of understand where the bills are in the process, and when we're spending a lot of time on a bill, it's really helpful to know that it's actually moving in the Senate so that we're not just wasting time. Thank you for your answers.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would Representative Ward yield to a question?
She will yield. Representative Anderson.
Representative Ward, can you tell me what counties requested this?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, it was Washington County.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Ward, if you'd continue to yield.
She will continue to yield. Representative Anderson.
Did any other county request this or need this at all, or is this just unique to Washington County?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Anderson, this was put into place some time ago, and with an opportunity for counties to do things in the way of with 30 days, with the way the bill is written, in 30 days. Washington County was the only county that adopted it, and the question came up in the Elections Committee. Why, if Washington County was the only one that adopted it, why can't they just unadopt it? And the answer is, it's a state statute. And the statute needs to be changed so that the timelines are consistent with the other election laws.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Ward, I guess I'm not tracking you. If you're saying that Washington County adopted the statute, or are you saying that Washington County adopted something different than all the other counties that we have in the state? Could you please clarify?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Counties have the option to elect by district. Washington County was the only one that adopted that.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, Representative Ward, wouldn't Washington County have the option to undo their resolution that they had in place?
Are you asking her to yield?
Mr. Speaker, if she would yield, please.
She will yield. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would you repeat the question, please?
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Ward, if Washington County was the only county in the entire state to adopt this resolution on their own, wouldn't they be able to unadopt their resolution and comply like all the other counties in the state?
Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. From the state summary, Washington County is the only county in the state to elect soil and water conservation district supervisor by district. State law lays out the timeline for redistricting for this type of governance. When the August primary was moved, this section of statute should have been updated as well for all of the counties, but it was overlooked. If any counties now move to adopt this, they would run into the same problem that Washington County did, and the statute needs to be changed. It fixes the timeline to align with the rest of the state laws regarding redistricting.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So you're saying we're changing state law for one county out of all the counties that we have in our state? If you would yield, please.
She will yield. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This is correcting a state law that was overlooked. It should have been done when the redistricting was done. Others were also changed to be in conforming, and this was the one that they missed.
Representative Anderson.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Representative Ward, it might be helpful if in the future, though, that it would be better, since this is one county out of all the other counties that we have in the state, and it would only really apply to this one county, that maybe an alternative method would be used. Just a suggestion. So, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. There being 122 ayes and 2 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 87.
House File 87, number 2 on the calendar for today, an act relating to real property.
The author of the bill, Representative Winkler.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, House File 87 is one of those dynamic, exciting bills brought to you by the Minnesota State Bar Association Real Property Section. Okay. It makes changes to affidavits of survivorship so people can transfer property and still pay their property taxes. It changes it codifies the current practice to allow partial mortgage releases. In 2 sections, members, it changes a 1-paragraph statute to a 2-paragraph statute. And it updates language in state statute to go from a CECT to a CICCT. And with that, members, I would ask for a green vote.
Discussion. Representative Doubt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to withdraw my amendments to this bill.
Representative Doubt withdraws all his amendments to the bill. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its 3rd reading.
3rd reading, House File 87.
3rd reading. Discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. Clerk will close the roll. There being 120 ayes and 4 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. The next bill on the calendar for the day is House File 90. The clerk will report the bill.
House File 90, number 3 on the calendar for today, the first engrossment, an act relating to crime.
Representative Hilstrom, to your bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Members, House File 90 was brought to me by the Vulnerable Adults Justice Project. Members, this is made up of groups of people who deal with vulnerable adults, and they make recommendations to the legislature about rules and statutes that we can change to make it easier to prosecute these kinds of cases. Members, Part 1 of the bill, what that does is it allows the ability for prosecutors to aggregate the amounts of the transactions when people steal money from vulnerable adults. Currently under our theft statute, we allow the aggregation if you steal money and use, for example, a financial transaction card and you use it in multiple counties, you can aggregate that amount over a 6-month period. This is just making it really clear in statute that we intend for that to apply in the financial exploitation of a vulnerable adult statute as well. Members, the second piece is a venue provision, and what it does is it allows prosecutors to prosecute these cases either where the vulnerable adult lived at the time that the financial exploitation took place, where the transactions were made when the money was stolen, or where the vulnerable adult currently resides. In many instances, the vulnerable adult is moved to another county, and we need to make certain that we have the ability to prosecute where the vulnerable adult is. Members, this statute is very similar to the child abuse statute. It just makes it consistent. So this is a non-controversial bill. It really is the practitioners who work together to make this this very important issue non-controversial. So members, I would urge your support. There are 2 handouts that are going around. One is by AARP, who supports the proposal. The other is an information sheet by the Vulnerable Adults Justice Project, including all of the members of the organization who have worked on this particular proposal. Members, I would urge your support.
There is an amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kelly moving to amend House File 90, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A3.
Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, members. And before I forget, I'd like a roll call on this, Mr. Speaker, please.
A roll call requested. There's 15 hands. There will be a roll call.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, I believe this is a very good bill and did hear this in public safety, but in the time period between when we passed this in reviewing in the language, I think we missed an opportunity to amend this bill, and I think a very good amendment here would be to not allow anyone to be a conservator or a guardian if they have committed a criminal sexual conduct in the 1st through 4th degree. I think it is important that we safeguard our vulnerable adults, and I'd appreciate your support.
Discussion to the amendment. Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, before I make a motion on the proposal, members, I'd just like to make it very clear that I actually have another bill going through the legislature to deal with guardianships and conservators that actually go further than the amendment that Representative Kelly has here. So I believe that Representative Kelly has a proposal here that is worth support, but this isn't the proper bill. And Representative Kelly, I really wish that you would consider withdrawing your amendment and actually working with me on the other proposal, which goes even further than what you're putting forward here. But with that, Mr. Speaker, I would move motions and propositions must be germane, and I would like to give advice, Mr. Speaker.
State your advice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this amendment is not germane to the bill because it amends a different statute entirely. It generally expands the scope of the bill by prohibiting guardians and conservators at the front end of the process instead of focusing on the purpose of the bill, which is prosecuting financial exploitation of vulnerable adults. And so, Mr. Speaker, I would ask that although I like the proposal, it is moving through the process, and I would ask that this amendment be found not germane to this proposal.
Discussion. Representative Kelly, for what purpose do you rise?
Advice, Mr. Speaker.
State your advice.
Mr. Speaker, before I ask for advice, could I ask for Representative Pawlowski to yield?
He will yield. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Pawlowski, last week you sent around an email suggesting that we look back to what your work was back in 2007 and 2008. And when I look back at that, it said that you were going to use the 2007 interim and the 2008 legislative session to study ways to improve the legislative process in Minnesota. Could you just answer me this quick question? How do you believe this 24-hour rule has improved our legislative process?
Mr. Speaker, what is the motion before the body?
The motion before the body is a point of order that Representative Hilstrom on germaneness.
Thank you. And that's all I wanted to say.
To the point of order. Advice, Representative Kelly?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I understand Representative Pawlowski not wanting to answer that question. But advice to the body would be, if we're looking at this bill in front of us, the first 524.5 through 09, who may be guardian? Priorities. My gosh, if there's anything more germane to this bill, is we're asking who can be guardian or conservator on the bill. All I'm saying is those who cannot be should not have any sexual misconduct charges filed against them. I think this is completely germane, and we're here to protect the vulnerable adults. Representative Hilstrom, you know that I carried this bill last year, so I am certainly a proponent of your bill and advocate to protect vulnerable adults. This just gives us the avenue to do that. So I would ask, Mr. Speaker, that you rule this is certainly germane to this bill.
Having listened to the advice of Representative Hilstrom and Representative Kelly, I rule the point of order is well taken. Representative Kelly.
I'd like to repeal the decision of the chair, please, or the speaker. I'm sorry, and ask for a roll call.
Roll call being requested. 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Discussion. Representative Kelly.
Mr. Speaker, I think, as I stated, if we're looking at the bill right in front of us, the first heading, 524.5, who may be guardian? And all I'm asking for is to define that. And you have an opportunity to do that, Mr. Speaker. And since the Speaker has ruled against that, the body now has an opportunity to protect those vulnerable adults. This is a vote to simply protect them against anybody being appointed a guardian or conservative that simply has had sexual misconduct charges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The question before the body is, shall the ruling of the Speaker be upheld? A yes or green vote means the Speaker's ruling is upheld. No vote or red vote means the Speaker's ruling is not upheld. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll. The clerk will close the roll. There being 73 ayes and 50 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the Speaker's ruling shall stand. There's another amendment at the desk. The clerk will report the amendment.
Kelly moving to amend House File 90, the first engrossment as follows. The amendment is coded A4.
Representative Kelly, to your amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, if we can't protect them from those who have been indicted of criminal sexual assault, how about if they have committed financial crimes? I mean, now we're talking about they have control of the checkbook, they have control of the individual's finances. These people are vulnerable adults. And now what we're asking is simply to protect them that have been indicted of and charged and have committed financial crimes. So could we please protect them against those? I would ask for your support, Mr. Speaker, and I'd ask for a roll call, please.
Roll call being requested. There's 15 hands. There will be a roll call. Representative Hilstrom.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And before I make my motion on this amendment as well, Representative Kelly, there is another bill that not only does this, but even goes further. That's coming, and I look forward to working with you on that proposal. Members, we have an opportunity here to work on a proposal that has been dealt with in a collaborative manner by all of the people that work in this area without making it political. We have an opportunity to have bipartisan support on a proposal that really will go far to protect vulnerable adults. This amendment, Mr. Speaker, I will move that under Rule 3.21 motions and propositions must be germane. And advice, Mr. Speaker.
State your advice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this amendment is not germane to the bill because, again, it amends a different portion of the statute entirely. It greatly expands the scope of the bill by prohibiting guardians and conservatives at the front end of the process instead of focusing on the purpose of the bill, which is prosecuting financial exploitation of vulnerable adults, which may or may not be a guardian or a conservator. I ask that you find that this amendment greatly expands the scope of the bill and that you find it not germane.
Discussion. Representative Kelly, what purpose do you rise?
Advice, Mr. Speaker.
State your advice.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, I won't ask Representative Pawlowski the same question, but I took him at his word that we were trying to improve the process. This 24-hour rule certainly should have given us plenty of time. I believe this amendment was filed on the 15th of February. So what I thought the 24-hour rule was supposed to do is to give the public an opportunity to weigh in. So I offered this amendment. I didn't hear from anyone. So I'm thinking good news, no news is good news, so I thought we have an opportunity to expedite the process, put this into the bill, and protect our vulnerable adults from any financial exploitation. So I believe this is absolutely pertinent and germane to the bill, and I'd appreciate your support. Thank you.
Representative Quam, what purpose do you rise?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Advice?
State your advice.
My advice is that you're complaining that the bill is at the end and this would be in the beginning. Well, I think it's a lot better to take care of a problem in the beginning, preventing a problem, than allowing it to fester at the end. And therefore, I think that this is germane. I think it's even more prudent to take care of it early on and prevent instead of trying to remedy. Thank you.
Having reviewed the amendment in the bill and listened to the advice of Representative Hilstrom and Kelly and Quam, I find that the point of order is well taken.
Mr. Speaker?
Representative Kelly.
I'd like to appeal the ruling on the Speaker and ask for a roll call, please.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Kelly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Pretty much same argument from before to the body. Just trying to protect our vulnerable adults. I hate to take votes like this when we really have an opportunity to protect them and support the process and expedite the process. As Representative Quam said, sometimes you just get an opportunity to improve a bill right here on the House floor without going through the committee. So I'd appreciate your support there and look forward to that.
Seeing no further discussion, this question before the body is: shall the ruling of the Speaker be upheld? A green or yes vote means that the ruling of the Speaker will be upheld. A red or no vote means the ruling of the Speaker is not upheld. The clerk will take the roll. Clerk will close the roll. There being 72 ayes and 51 nays, it is the judgment of the House that the ruling of the Speaker shall stand. There are no further amendments at the desk. The clerk will give the bill its third reading.
Third reading, House File 90.
Third reading. Discussion to the bill. Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the bill. The clerk will close the roll. Representative Scott votes aye. There being 122 ayes and 0 nays, the bill is passed and its title agreed to. Motions and resolutions. Members, there are copies of the non-controversial motions at the House desk and online. If there's no objection, we will take action on those motions first. Hearing no objection, the motions prevail.
Fabian moves that House File 279, now on the General Register, be re-referred to the Committee on Jobs, Economic Development, Finance Policy.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to move that House File 279 be referred to the Committee on Jobs and Economic Development. This is a bill that is instructing the legislative auditor to audit the Job Z program instead of the state auditor. And obviously, the Job Z program is a program that incorporates a lot of different tax and so forth, tax relief to businesses that expand and create jobs within relocate here in Minnesota. DEED has reported that Job Z has created over 7,000 jobs, 17 with wages of $17.36 an hour on average. It also has created lots of direct and indirect jobs, 21,000 they're reporting, average yearly wage of about $38,000. And since Job Z is under the purview of the Department of Employment and Economic Development and DEED is under the purview of the Jobs Committee, it seems important to me that we should have this bill moved to the Jobs and Economic Development Committee. I ask for a roll call, Mr. Speaker.
Roll call has been requested. Seeing 15 hands, there will be a roll call. Representative Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. Well, I urge a no vote on the motion, although I understand, Representative Fabian, where you're coming from. This is my bill, and this is really about an administrative switcheroo. For whatever reason, I don't even know what the reason was, a few years ago, the audit function for Job Z was placed with the state auditor, which is really a mismatch because the state auditor audits local governments, as you know, and it's really much better placed with the legislative auditor, over whom we in the legislature have more direct control anyway. So this isn't anything to do with the merits of Job Z. It sounds like you're a big fan. The point is who should be doing the audit work, and by the way, this was an agreement reached and agreed to by both entities. In other words, the legislative auditor agreed that he probably should have the authority to do the audits, and the state auditor, Rebecca Otto, agreed that she probably shouldn't. We simply went to committee. It wasn't controversial. This is just about who does the audits. Everyone seems to agree. It's not about the merits of the program. So, members, I don't think this needs a hearing in an additional committee. It's just really kind of a technical bill about who does which chores. Please vote no.
Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And if Representative Simon would yield, please.
Representative Simon will yield. Representative Fabian.
Thank you, Representative Simon, for that. I'm just curious to know, in the testimony that was presented by the legislative auditor, Mr. Nobles, did he have any concerns about this moving forward, whether it was financial or the ability of them to be able to carry it out? But I am concerned ultimately, Mr. Speaker, about this coming back to the Jobs and Economic Development Committee. Thank you.
Representative Simon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Fabian, no, he did not have any concerns after we put on a technical amendment at his request. And the technical amendment he had, if I recall, had to do with the resources of the Legislative Auditor's Office. It was making the wording something like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it was something like, as resources are available, the Legislative Auditor may or shall, I think, do these audits. So that was it. He wanted to make sure it wasn't absolutely mandatory because obviously at a time of scarcity he doesn't always have the money to do everything we want him to do. But after that amendment went on, at his request, he testified in favor of the bill, and he hasn't told me of any other problems that he has with the bill, so I assume he supports it as he did at the end of the last hearing.
Representative Nelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And as to go on to beyond what Auditor Noble said, is that they, as a matter of course, they take the money they have and the resources they have, and they do what they can. And other things may have to drop off. But he also, when he talked about it in committee, he said that he will be coming forward asking for more resources for his department. But they use those as the best they can do with the audits they have to do.
Seeing no further discussion, the clerk will take the roll on the motion. Clerk will close the roll. There being 51 ayes and 71 nays, the motion does not prevail.
Detmer, Dean R., Hoppe, Lenczewski, Marquardt introducing House Resolution Number 2, expressing the sense of the House in opposition to the International Olympic Committee decision to remove freestyle and Greco-Roman wrestling from the Olympic Games. The resolution is being referred to the Committee on Rules and Legislative Administration.
Announcements. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I'd just like to make a couple of announcements. First of all, I'd like to announce that we seem to survive the first session with the pre-filing amendment in place. And while it was a little bumpy, I do think that we were able to conduct the work of the people. I also would like to announce that the rule in place did not gag anybody. We heard as many amendments as you were willing to offer, and you were able to withdraw those that you wanted to. I think that's also really good news. Further, I'd like to announce that we still have work to do for Minnesota. Our classrooms are bursting with kids, our lakes and streams are clogging with invasive species, and for more than a decade we've been balancing the budget with gimmicks, and we could probably do better. So today we had 159 amendments for 4 simple bills. I think Minnesotans probably deserved a little better than that, but we made good headway today, and I want to thank everybody for that. And then lastly, I'd like to announce for the DFL members there'll be a caucus immediately after session. The caucus will be in our caucus room here, 217.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if Representative Lesh would yield for a question.
Well, Representative, we're on announcements, but he can stand up and after you ask your question.
Okay. Well, my question concerns the data practices deadline for bills. Just wondered if he would comment on maybe what the rush is there to have all the bills in by the 21st in order to hear them on Wednesday the 27th. Is there any way, I mean, that's not a whole lot of time to prepare our bills from today's date. Just wondering if he would consider pushing that the 21st date back and the 27th date back as well.
Representative Lesh.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Scott. The reason for the purpose in getting the data practice bills in is in consultation with Representative Holberg, who I think has correctly surmised that we need to have an omnibus data practices bill on the floor. And in order to do that, for the bill to make deadline for the other committees, we need to have the bills in at a reasonable time with the waning deadline. So I set that time for Thursday in light of the previous email that I sent out a week ago saying there is going to be a looming deadline. And I recently set the deadline. It needs to be on Thursday. So I thought that was reasonable. If there are issues, I haven't heard about any particular issues. I'd be happy to entertain those, but only through the context that I think Representative Holberg and I agree that there needs to be an omnibus bill on the floor in order for this to be efficient.
Representative Scott.
Thank you, and thank you, Representative Lesh. When we put together the Data Practices Subcommittee Omnibus Bill last year, I know we allowed quite a bit more time for the bills to come in and be heard, so if the Chair would be agreeable to being a little bit lenient on that, that would be great.
Representative Dowd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm wondering if the Majority Leader could let us know if any more bills have been received that are part of the Governor's budget.
She will yield. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Representative Doughton, members, we have not received another bill from the Revisor's Office.
Representative Doughton.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further announcements. Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker and members. I move that when the House adjourns today, it adjourns until 12 noon, Wednesday, February 20th, 2013.
Representative Murphy moves that when the House adjourns today, it adjourn until 12 noon, Wednesday, February 20th, 2013. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. Motion prevails. Representative Murphy.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House do now adjourn.
Representative Murphy moves that the House do now adjourn. All those in favor, say aye. All opposed, no. The motion prevails. The House stands adjourned until noon on Wednesday, February 20th, 2013.